Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. This is the public hearing and the public meeting of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 250195, 250196, 250197, 250198, 250199, 250200, 250201, 250202, 250210, 250211, 250212, and resolution number 250214. Ms. Lawhead, will you please call the attendance?
Councilmember Squilla. Councilmember Gautier. Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Young. Councilmember Driscoll. Councilmember Lozada. Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Phillips. Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Harity. Councilmember Ahmad. Councilmember Landau. Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember O'Rourke. Councilmember Bass. Council President Johnson.
Present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. Ms. Lawhead, will you please read the title of the resolutions?
Bill number 250195, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1500 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Wage and Net Profits Tax by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250196, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2026. Bill number 250197, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2026 capital budget. Bill number 250198, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2026 through 2031 inclusive. Bill number 250199, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Business Income and Receipts Taxes to revise certain tax rates and end certain exclusions from the tax on receipts, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250200, an ordinance amending Chapter 12-1000 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Traffic Code to revise the fee for the use of parking meters, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250201, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1800 of the Philadelphia Code entitled School Tax Authorization to provide for an increase in the tax that the Board of Education of the School District of Philadelphia is authorized to impose on real estate, and amending Chapter 19-1300 entitled Real Estate Taxes to establish an equivalent reduction in the tax rate for the city real estate tax, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250202, an ordinance amending Section 19-1806 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Authorization of Realty Use and Occupancy Tax to eliminate certain exemptions, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250210, an ordinance amending Section 10-1001 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Fees of Commissioner of Records to increase the portion of fees for the recording of deeds and mortgages and related documents to be used for housing trust fund purposes under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250211, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1400 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Realty Transfer Tax by revising the rate of the tax, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 250212, an ordinance to amend Chapter 19-4400 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Development Impact Tax to end the imposition of the tax under certain terms and conditions. Resolution number 250214, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2026 through 2030, and incorporating revisions with respect to fiscal year 25, which is to be submitted by the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, pursuant to an intergovernmental cooperation agreement by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you very much. Today we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal year 2026, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal year 2026 through fiscal year 2031. Today we have scheduled testimony regarding the Housing Opportunities Made Easy Home Initiative. Ms. Lawhead, will you please call the first witness to testify?
The first person to testify is Tiffany Thurman, Chief of Staff, Office of the Mayor.
morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Council President Johnson and members of City Council. My name is Tiffany Thurman, Chief of Staff to Mayor Parker, and I'm honored to testify in support of the Housing Opportunities Made Easy initiative. Joining me today are Chief Housing and Urban Development Officer Angela Brooks, Department of Planning and Development Director Jesse Lawrence, and our consultant Greg Heller, along with our entire team of senior leaders working around the clock on this very important initiative. Council President, we all know the vision to make Philadelphia the safest, cleanest, and greenest big city in the nation with access to economic opportunity for all. Advancing each pillar of this vision is essential to improving the quality of life for every Philadelphian. But as the mayor has said, there is no single issue other than public safety that is more important in our city than access to housing. This is why we are truly grateful for your leadership, Council President, and also for City Council's partnership in pursuing our shared vision. Without this, getting big things done just isn't possible. The special attention this body is devoting to housing is again showing your continued dedication to the City of Philadelphia and all of our residents. Some have suggested we don't have a housing crisis. Council President, I am confident you believe us when I say we have a housing crisis now in Philadelphia, and we need to address it together. We need more housing, and we need it now. Grounded in data, leading national practices, hearing residents' voices, and what has been known to work in Philadelphia, the HOME Initiative centers access to affordable, quality, safe housing as our top city priority. But why now? Why this big? Why this scale? Is this the right time, given all the uncertainty in our country? Council President, Mayor Parker, and this administration respectfully submit to you, we cannot afford to wait. We cannot hedge our bets against going small. We cannot and must not be paralyzed by what is happening in Washington. Philadelphians of many socioeconomic brackets need access to housing, and they need it now. We also know we cannot do this alone. Intergovernmental collaboration is a hallmark of this administration. If we work together, side by side, and as we have done consistently since day one, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish together, including a $2 billion historic and unprecedented housing plan to build, preserve, and restore 3,000 units of housing in Philadelphia. Some have also suggested that our home plan scope and scale is too large and not focused enough on those citizens who are the most income challenged. Council President, we cannot and will not create boxes for access to housing in Philadelphia. We will not pit the have-nots against those that have just a little bit. The need is too broad, the demand is too strong, and our plan must be that comprehensive. Today, we are proposing the creation of a new housing ecosystem for Philadelphia. It is desperately needed. We are establishing a track record of results, and in collaboration with this council, we can and we will do that for Philadelphia. Fortunately, we still have some considerable advantages that Chief Housing and Urban Development Officer Brooks and Director Lawrence will speak to shortly. But these are just several of the critical factors driving the urgency around this issue I know that we all feel. First, most of our housing stock is old and built before 1960, with nearly 40% of the current supply built in 1939 or earlier, and a quarter built between 1940 and 1959. In the region, roughly 2 of 5 homeowners and renters face critical repair needs. Council members Jones, Phillips, and O'Neill, we know housing and home preservation is a priority, and this is a huge part of our HOME initiative. Our inventory is also shrinking. The number of vacant housing units in Philadelphia, both for sale and for rent, have declined over the past 2 decades. The simple economics of this declining supply has pushed prices up, squeezing out both renters and aspiring homeowners. At approximately 52%, our rate of home ownership is relatively high compared to other cities, and that's been validated. And owner occupancy rates, including for Black and brown residents, have remained relatively stable over the span of a decade. Despite this baseline, significant racial and ethnic home ownership gaps remain and must be closed in our lifetime under our leadership. Considering our more vulnerable residents, Council members Lozada, Driscoll, Harity, and Squilla have been laser focused on the complex and intertwined challenges facing the Kensington community. One of these is addressing housing stability, especially for renters, and ensuring that our homeless residents can access not only wraparound services, but shelter and permanent housing. Many Philadelphians are cost burdened, paying more than 30% of income towards housing. Some are severely cost burdened, paying a staggering 50% or more. What does this leave for groceries, eggs, travel, school supplies, or many other basic necessities? Council members Gautier, Brooks, and O'Rourke have been raising these points repeatedly. For that, I say thank you. This is putting tremendous, that's right, it deserves an applause. This is putting tremendous pressure on families to make ends meet, and those who have the least are at risk of housing instability and homelessness. Finally, seniors. Seniors need more access to housing. So do our veterans who serve their country, and so do our tremendous municipal workers, our teachers, our firefighters, police officers, sanitation and street workers, our entire municipal workforce. We're going to build housing for the people who make the city work. The massive scale of the need is why our goal is to build, preserve, and restore 30,000 units of housing over the next 4 years. The HOME Initiative, as we'll discuss today, is not just a housing plan, but a bold and ambitious and attainable strategy with a comprehensive array of action steps that will deliver results. To meet this moment, the administration is proposing a $2 billion financing strategy, a historic investment unlike any seen in generations. This includes nearly $1 billion in funding from the public sector, a sum of the $800 million in borrowing in fiscal years 26 through 30, 5-year plan, and approximately $20 million in other local, state, and federal funds. Another $1 billion will come from the value of the city's land and assets that will contribute to housing production. That methodology we're prepared to speak to. Council members Thomas and Landau have smartly been inquiring about whether we can actually afford this. And we can, we must. So let's be clear together, Council President. This $800 million borrowing is a drop in the bucket of what we need to build, preserve, and restore more housing right now in Philadelphia. Critically, our public total investment will be leveraged further by philanthropic community, private capital, and our union partners that will add millions more. And while the construction and preservation of housing is our goal, we cannot overlook the powerful opportunity this offers for family-sustaining jobs and workforce development, issues that Council members Gilmore Richardson and Ahmad have raised. This is a huge part of the initiative, and we've planned for months, over a year, in close coordination with the building trades, GBCA, and BIA. We'll be investing in workforce development for apprenticeship programs with the trades and through the Sam Staten Senior Pre-Apprenticeship Program, and have an accounting of the people coming through these programs into those good paying jobs. And why are we doing all of this? Because the HOME plan is pro-growth, pro-jobs, and pro-economic opportunity for every Philadelphian. Our City College for Municipal Employment is both integrated into this plan for exactly that reason. I cannot emphasize this enough. The focus, the urgency, our commitment, the mayor and our administration is bringing to bear on these very critical issues for Philadelphians. When the mayor says she wants shovels in the ground, she means it, and we intend to deliver that as early as this fall. This includes swift efforts to cut red tape and streamline internal processes, a roadmap for which is already drawn up. These recommendations and report pursuant to Executive Order 3-25 now live on our website for every resident to see how we plan to make real changes. Council members Bass and Young, this means at the land bank too, which will need to move hundreds of properties back into productive use, mitigating blight and revitalizing communities. We'll expand programs like Turn the Key and Basic System Home Repair Plus to meet the demand while creating new programs to fill gaps, reaching not only lower income residents, but those middle income bands who also urgently need help throughout the city. These programs work, Council President, and you and Mayor Parker helped launch Turn the Key together under our friend and ally, the previous council president, Darrell Clark. This is a critical program under our home initiative, and the mayor wants to put Turn the Key on steroids. And we'll take a hard look in collaboration with this body at policy changes that are needed now, from zoning to tax initiatives or tax incentives to stimulate construction. We'll be transmitting legislation in the coming weeks with some of these policy changes, which we hope will be passed by this legislative body by the end of the session, that will allow us to begin to implement this plan. Thank you again for your commitment to all of these issues and for today's discussion and how we address them together. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Chief Housing and Urban Development Officer Brooks, to offer an overview of the initiative and how this unique opportunity for us to become a national leader. Brooks?
Thank you, Chief Thurman, and thank you, Council President and Council members, for the warm welcome since I joined the administration last month. One of the questions I've been asked most often is what made me leave a city that I love to come work in Philadelphia, and that answer really directly leads to why we're here today. As the immediate past president of the American Planning Association, the largest urban planning organization in the world, I had the privilege of co-chairing the Housing Supply Accelerator. This was a national campaign that's working to improve local capacity, identify critical solutions, and accelerate reforms to enable communities and developers to collaborate on producing, preserving, and providing diverse, quality, attainable housing options for all. In partnership with the National League of Cities, we produced the Housing Supply Accelerator Playbook for local elected officials and community planners working to boost attainable and equitable housing options nationwide. Throughout my travels speaking about increasing housing supply, I heard from planners and elected leaders like you about meeting housing needs in vastly changing communities. The consistent challenge everywhere, lack of housing supply. This isn't just a Philadelphia issue. Up for Gross Annual Housing Under Production report continues to show that the U.S. is underproducing by approximately 4 million units per year, with suburban and rural areas seeing increasing shortages each year as well. While Philadelphia has experienced a surge in housing production over the past 5 years, this growth hasn't addressed the full housing need, leaving a shortage of approximately 17,000 new units. When I saw this opportunity and learned about the plans for the largest housing investment in the city's history, with mayor and council collaboratively working together to meet the needs of a legacy city, I knew I had to be a part of it. Ensuring Philadelphia offers diverse housing options for people of all income brackets, races, veteran status, ages, and physical abilities, etc., is why the Home Initiative is so vital at this time. The initiative includes a comprehensive set of targeted recommendations and city investments allocated across the following areas: preserving homes so they remain livable, healthy, safe, and high quality, ensuring all Philadelphians can afford quality homes in amenity-rich communities with access to jobs, building more housing in all income levels in all neighborhoods by unlocking the potential of our land, making the city work better for people by improving city processes and enhancing customer service, reducing housing instability and preventing homelessness through interventions like rental assistance, and investing in permanent supportive housing, because we know the wraparound services are important, making our homes and communities resilient by investing in infrastructure and housing to withstand natural disasters, reducing blight and improving our communities by redeveloping vacant lots and buildings while greening and beautifying our blocks. With Philadelphia's aging housing stock, we need to preserve approximately 16,500 units, evenly split between home ownership and rental properties. The Home Initiative provides a comprehensive housing needs assessment that outlines tenure type, rental or owner, target income levels, and preservation or creation requirements. At the same time, we're thrilled to lift up striking and complementary strategy put forward by the Philadelphia Housing Authority to meet the city's total housing needs. Again, as a Housing Authority alum, I am super excited about the work PHA is doing. I've seen how this is playing out in other cities. The Opening Doors plan by Calvin Jeremiah's leadership to redevelop, build, or acquire roughly 2,000 units over 8 years will put Philadelphia on the map and is complementary to the work that we're proposing here. No city in the country has a single major initiative with the ambition and possibilities that we're talking about today, let alone two that have been developed and rolled out together. As for the city, the Department of Planning and Development will play a pivotal role in achieving the unprecedented goals of the Home Initiative. Director Jesse Lawrence and his team have been working relentlessly and in close collaboration with other city departments to stand this initiative up. He'll conclude our opening remarks by briefly discussing DPD's role and how investments in continuing, expanding, and launching effective housing programs will propel us toward achieving this initiative's goals. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Angela. And thank you, Council President. And thank you, Council members, for providing this particular opportunity for us to take this deeper dive into the Home Initiative and the plan. The Department of Planning and Development stands ready to take on its central role in the Home Initiative. We have the benefit of an experienced team and subject matter experts in development, project financing, affordable housing, land management, zoning, and land use, city planning, evaluation and monitoring, and funding streams that have been established at the federal, state, and local levels. Many of these experts are joined with me here today, including John Monlock, First Deputy and Chief of Staff, Mark Dodds, Interim Director of the Division of Housing and Community Development, Octavia Howe, our Deputy Director for the Division of Planning and Zoning, Emily Persico, Deputy Director for Development Services, and Kathleen Grady, our Deputy Director for Finance and Administration. We're also joined here today by leaders of our quasi-public partner, the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, PHDC, including Dave Thomas, our President and CEO of that, and Angel Rodriguez, who is the Senior Vice President of Land Services. We work hand in hand with PHDC, the quasi-governmental agency that's been created by City Council for the very purpose of administering programs to implement city housing objectives, sharing key staff in office management, IT, communications roles as well, and even working side by side in co-located office space as well. And we support the Philadelphia Land Bank in similar ways. We are fully aligned with the core home tenet of cross-departmental, cross-governmental, and cross-sector collaboration as we're working on a daily basis with elected officials, numerous city departments, developers, foundations, financial institutions, nonprofits, and organizations of that nature, neighborhood groups, state and federal agencies, and business and civic and community leaders as well. This uniquely suits us for our role under the Home Initiative for convening stakeholders and using their feedback to improve our proposed policies, plans, and programs. The Home Plan calls for continuing and expanding our existing successful housing programs, many of which our research has shown are considered some of the best in the country, national models even. Our research has also shown, however, that there are gaps in our housing coverage of issues and home plans that propose, and our home plan proposes 19 new programs specifically designed to fill these gaps. One such program is the new One Philly Mortgage Program that will help Philadelphian households at or under 120% of AMI to become first-time home buyers. We expect at least 3,000 households to benefit from One Philly mortgages with 30-year fixed rates, low down payments, very low interest rates, and perhaps most impactfully, no private mortgage insurance. Meanwhile, Home will drastically expand the popular Basic Systems Repair Program, a program that is already helping 20 households a day, but that can certainly do such more if we get what we propose. Eligibility at 100% of AMI and more is where we're looking to expand those eligibility levels and income levels, along with a more comprehensive portfolio of repair services as well. But those are just two of the several dozen programs that have been outlined in the Home Initiative, and we look forward to discussing those goals that they meet and all of this ambitious initiative efforts that we can achieve with our residents. So as I conclude, I thank you again, Council President, for the opportunity as we stand ready for questions and feedback at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And before I turn it over to my colleagues, I just have a couple of questions that I want to ask. Tiffany, I like how you talked about that we're pushing back on this notion that there isn't a housing crisis in the city of Philadelphia. And you said, in fact, it is indeed a housing crisis. And I remember when we did the press conference for the executive order, I ultimately believe that we're in a housing crisis simply for the fact that as a district council member, day in and day out, we have individuals coming to our office seeking some type of housing assistance. And so can you and your team give us an overview on the data that was used specifically for the city of Philadelphia that shows that we have an actual housing crisis? And then also, I know we talked about the issue of affordability. That was mentioned by Ms. Brooks, particularly around those who are renting, people who spend more than 50% of their income just to actually rent a rental unit. And so let's talk about the affordability and the housing crisis, but give me the data that shows that in the city of Philadelphia, we are indeed facing a housing crisis.
Absolutely, Council President. I'll start with the data, and Angela Brooks will talk about that based on her national experience and even international experience, and then compared to what we're seeing here locally in the city of Philadelphia, then I'll turn it over to Greg. And to the point that you raised, you're absolutely right. I'm getting those calls from your chief of staff, your district chief of staff, Tiffany White. Right? It's sun up to sundown. The waiting list for turnkey, basic systems home repair, it's long, it's growing. People need rental assistance. That list is long and growing. We're working with OHS, with Cheryl Hill, making sure that we're able to meet the needs there and through the planning department, and it's just not enough. It's not enough. So absolutely we know it, but when I look at you, I think about the calls that I receive, myself, regarding the long lists that are in your district alone. And it's not just unique to your district, that's throughout the entire city. But in terms of the data, I'll kick it over to Angela now to answer that.
Thank you very much.
I'm pulling up so I can quote specific Philadelphia data, and actually, Ira, you might be probably better, huh? I'm going to tag in Ira because he's going to have a lot of the local Philadelphia data since you asked specific to Philadelphia.
So we're calling up now Ira Goldstein, another one of our consultants from the Reinvestment Fund.
Mr. Goldstein, just state your name for the record.
Yes, sir. My name is Ira Goldstein. And answer to your question, first of all, I think that it is a little bit of a sort of a false choice to talk about there being a housing crisis or an income crisis. I think the fact is that we really have both. And if you look at the best thinking about what's going on in the housing market right now, people point to issues that take us to where we are right this moment based on structural issues in the housing market. Like, for example, over the last several decades, home prices have risen and rents have risen faster than people's incomes. Those are the structural things. You have dynamic things like issues that attach to the pandemic that created supply chain crises, thereby driving up those prices, and those will go up and down as the things resolve. But then you also have self-imposed things, and every community around the country has self-imposed things. Do we do things quickly enough? Do we do things efficiently enough? All of those things add to cost. So do you have a housing crisis? I think the answer is yes. Some of the Philadelphia specific data points to things like, for example, our typical home price over the last several years has gone up from $175,000 right before the pandemic to over $240,000 now. That's a 37% increase. But if you look at the first quartile, the 25% of housing units that sold at the sort of the lowest range, those jumped up from 93,000 to 145,000, which represents a much larger proportionate rise. So what that means is Philadelphia's portion of the housing market where more modest income people were able to get in has become much more difficult. Our interest rates have gone up. When you pair those rises of interest rates with the rising amounts of the home prices, it makes it doubly difficult for people to
Let me
get
do
in.
a deeper dive.
Yep.
And I think Jesse Mike can also answer this as well. So just give me an overview, Jesse, on, and maybe I know we have folks who are here from PHDC.
Yes.
So how many people are on a waiting list for basic systems repair?
So I think that waiting list spans a series of months, but I'd like to call up David Thomas to talk about how exactly those numbers
Because what I want to do, right, I want to frame that here's the foundation of why we have a crisis. This is the methodology as to why we came up with this particular initiative, right?
Yes.
And the data that shows that we have this many people in the waiting line for BSRP, this
Yep.
many people applied for our first-time home buyers program, just to show the level of need. I want to see it crystallize for the body.
So I'd like to kick it over to Dave to can give you the specific numbers I think you're talking about. All right. Morning, Council President.
Good morning.
Council. To be clear, I'm not too certain what you asked me, so I want to be specific.
So
if
I
you
want to
ask
get
me
an idea of all the programs that you operate under your purview,
Yep.
right, that deals with housing, right? Tell me the numbers. How many people on the basic systems repair? I know we're talking about keeping MPI moving forward, right? How many people are on the waiting list that as relates to utilizing those particular programs? Just show that there's an actual crisis that we're dealing with, and I'm sure we have the data that shows here's why we need to ramp up and borrow $1 billion to address the issue.
Sure. So for BSRP, currently I have a waiting list of about 7,000. I can't
And
tell you they're all.
clarify for the record, what is BSRP for those who do not know, to the listening public?
BSRP is the Basic System Repair Program. It provides emergency repair to homeowners.
What type of
for
emergency
homeowners.
repairs?
Roofing, plumbing, electric, structural, as well as some cosmetics, but very few. But
So
most of it is
7,000
major.
on the waiting list.
7,000 on the waiting list. We do about $1 million a week in repairs. I have about 100 contractors, so we certainly have the capacity, but obviously we have some challenges because the need is great. I get about 200 expressions a week looking for services or support, and those numbers ramp up when we have bad weather, torrential rain, things of that nature.
So that's just to address the aging infrastructure.
That is correct.
That we have in the city of Philadelphia. Let me go into first-time home buyers. Let's talk about that particular program as well.
That program, which would be Turn the Key.
Yes.
Yes, Turn the Key. We have a large demand for that as well. The challenge that most people have, obviously, is the affordability, the cost of purchasing a new home or just purchasing a home at all.
Pause right there, but we have a program
Yes.
that was created to help with first-time home buyers, the down payment. And the name of
Yes.
that program is what?
Turn the Key.
No. What's the name of the program that gives in, that a person can sign
Philly
up for?
First. Philly First.
Elaborate on it. Is that program in high demand, or I want you to crystallize it to us.
Okay.
So you should be laying out and saying, here's all of our key programs, here's the demand for the programs, hence why we need $1 billion to continue this initiative. But a point of information from Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke.
I just wanted to get what the actual number is. You said there's roughly 7,000 on the list. What is the actual number that are on the waiting list as it relates to BSRP?
That number moves daily, so I'll give you what I have in front of me. And that number was 7,054.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Talk about Philly First program
Philly
and the
First.
level of demand for it when we
Yeah.
talk about affordability.
Philly First program, that too has a huge demand. Philly First is a program for first-time buyers. It provides settlement assistance up to $10,000 or 6% of the sale price. That program too, I think we started that program quite some time ago, and truth be told, I'll just say this. I certainly thought that after the pandemic, that program would diminish or something because we thought it was a big challenge, but that program has remained relatively steady throughout this time. So we're getting, I want to say, I haven't looked at that number too much, but we are looking at several $1 million in first-time grants. So I have to say, several thousand people who have tried to become first-time home buyers through that
Does that
program.
exemplify to you a need for
The need,
continuing investment?
the need is great. The need is continue to be there. I don't see that need coming down anytime soon, especially given
the rising prices of housing and the interest rates that people are being faced with.
And out of the 7,000 that's on the wait list, how many have we actually served? I mean, we have 7,000 on the wait list. How many have we actually served just in total?
Of the 7,000 on the wait list for,
So the wait list is the amount that haven't been addressed, right? But on average,
I get about 3,500 a year.
3,500 a year.
Yes.
Okay. And I'll come back to you later on. But I just want to, again, we crystallizing this whole conversation around affordability and crisis, right?
Yes.
That's a part of the home initiative. We say we don't want to pit the have versus the have-nots, right? We had a town hall last night, and again, the debate is that the area median income for the federal level doesn't respect our district council constituencies that we represent, right? And so how do we strategize to make sure that we're not amplifying gentrification based upon the MPI, based upon the AMI method that we're using, right? Because obviously when you build more houses, value goes up, taxes goes up, right? And again, I want to be clear, it's not one group versus the other, but really being sensitive to that population of individuals who may be at an economic price point that they can only purchase a home at a certain level. So talk about the strategy of, and that's not for you, Mr. Dave Thomas, it's for Jesse, how we're going to address that conversation in terms of this strategy. And I did see the breakdown, so I have an idea, but let's also talk about it for the public, so the greater public can know how we're addressing the AMI conversation. And again, we want to support everybody, but I also believe as representative of government, first priority is to represent those who don't have a voice. And that's usually individuals who are impoverished, coming out of poverty, and maybe going on the threshold to be middle income as well.
Right. Well,
comprehensively.
We recognize that, that federal AMI is far out of sync with what Philadelphians are, right? And that number is quantified on a metro area basis. Simply put, that average is offset by the collar counties that have some affluence. So what we do here is we look at, for Turnkey, for instance, right? That number is quantified, or the sale prices are backed into a way where we look at the ability to sell properties at a certain price point, understanding where folks would be able to qualify on purchasing those properties, understanding what the debt-to-income ratio would be on actual Philadelphians. So, we know what Philadelphians are at in terms of a, average. So there's 100% of AMI that's quantified on a metro area level, but that number, your average Philadelphian is about high 50s, low 60s, right? So we make sure that we're providing these opportunities on the home buyer side through Turn the Key to be able to price point to be able to sell the properties, sell to those who can actually qualify, be able to increase their household income into the maximum AMIs that we've set at 80% of AMI or 100% of AMI for Turn the Key price points for sale properties. But at the same time, we've done this in a way where we've made sure that mortgage comes in a way in response to what actual AMIs are. So it's the 50% to 60%. Most Turn the Key applicants are qualifying and purchasing those homes. They're at a high 50, low 60% of AMI.
Now, strategically, how would you work with district council members where one district may say, I'm comfortable with 80, another district may say, I'm comfortable with 40, and another district may say, I'm okay at 100, right? How does your strategy play into that in the event that we pre-approve properties and working a partnership with the administration?
Well, the strategy would be based on conversations, like you said, on a district-by-district basis, right? And it would look into what the markets can sustain in certain areas without completely needing a ton of subsidy, because, with what we do, there's always a kind of ranging or fluctuation in how much the city needs to subsidize to get those price points lower than they would be on a market rate basis, right? So we would have those conversations with City Council to understand where the market can sustain purchase prices at certain levels, understanding that, sales might imply where, we might want to take some initiative in investing and sparking up the market, where we don't want to necessarily create the market, but where we might want to stabilize the market, where folks are being priced out in a way where, we talk about gentrification, we talk about displacement risk. That's the attention that we're paying toward that, and that's part of the strategy.
When you talk about this is a $2 billion investment, the other $1 billion deals with the land value. Do we do property assessments of all the land that's being put forth and come up with that $1 billion number? Where does the $1 billion of land investment come from? And how do we arrive to that number?
So before I turn it over to Greg to talk about the formula that we derive that number from, that number is, again, the formula involves a certain, it's citywide. It looks at vacant property sales citywide as well. It also looks at the value that has been assessed at a low, medium, and high rate, and that average is taken on a zip code by zip code basis. But I'll turn it over to Greg to talk much more intimately about it.
Good morning, everybody. Greg Heller, I'm a consultant for the city. So the first thing I just want to make clear is that $1 billion, the purpose of it is to estimate the value of the city's land that's going into the home plan to create housing.
I'm clear on that, but I just want to know how you got that number.
That price is not based on how the land will actually be sold. Each parcel will be sold according to the city's land dispositions policy, which requires different types of valuation and or appraisal. Okay.
I just want to know, Greg, how do you get to the number?
Yep, understood. All right, so the methodology we used was we identified vacant parcels using city property data and city reported vacant lots. Then we calculated a per square foot value for every zip code in the city by two methods. One is assessed value and the other is sales data, sales post 2021. Then we cleaned and normalized the data by removing outliers via interquartile range filtering. We removed the top and bottom 25%. Then we estimated the total land value by applying a zip code level average to each parcel in the city's vacant land inventory. Based on those two valuation methods, we feel comfortable that using the sales-based approach, which is likely more accurate, that the city's inventory is worth approximately $1 billion. Especially for future development and disposition planning purposes. And I also just want to emphasize that we have experienced housing finance professionals who did this work and validated it with the city.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I have one last question I'm going to turn over to my members. I know we're doing a lot of work with basic systems repair. Can you give me a reasoning why we didn't include the Built to Last program, which is the cousin of basic systems repair? If we're talking about addressing housing infrastructure in the city of Philadelphia, why wouldn't we not include another successful program that works in partnership with BSRP?
Council President, I think we, in doing this, we tried to make sure that we addressed as many programs as we could possibly address here. And I think we saw some similarities in the operations of Built to Last and basic systems repair. So as we talk about the ability to expand basic systems repair, we'd like to see it go beyond some of the emergency services repairs that we've typically seen historically. And we'd like to, see about or think about how we can bring some of that scope into the basic systems repair, where we might be shortchanging.
Is basic system repair, I guess essentially you're saying y'all moving in the realm of weatherization.
We are looking into expanding.
As opposed to dealing with PEA.
As we think about the opportunities to expand some of these programs, we do see some opportunities in actually centralizing some of that stuff.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, point of clarity too. Weatherization is now being carried out by PHDC going forward.
Okay.
Energy Authority is not handling weatherization any longer.
So it sounds like a phase out, so to speak, because
No, it's not a phase.
I'm just asking.
I don't know about a phase out. All I know is the state approached PHDC asking that we take over the weatherization program a month ago.
No, when I say a phase out, it just sounds like if basic systems repair, a successful program, and you're saying we didn't put Built to Last as a part of this because we're looking at expanding the scope of work that Basic Systems Repair is doing, then that means the only thing that Basic Systems Repair, the only thing that Built to Last is doing that Basic Systems Repair isn't doing is primarily the weatherizing of the homes, the solar panels, the coming inside the property and making sure that it's weatherized, right? Heating efficient, cooling efficient, right? And from my understanding, that's why Built to Last and PEA, Philadelphia Energy Authority, works in partnership with Basic Systems Repair to kind of supplement one another, particularly when it comes to weatherizing of homes and fixing up the roofs and so forth. But if we're going in that direction with Basic Systems Repair and PHDC is doing weatherization, I would think because the need is so great, and I heard this before, why can't we just expand and do both? That was for Mr. Jesse,
Well, I mean,
as the head of this strategy.
we remain open to talking about how Built to Last can play a role into this, because we certainly have identified that we support it and we support the
I
continuance
just
of
want
the
to go on
program.
record and say that I think it would be a great part of the proposal. Like, I know council can fight and advocate for it, but I just think it's just naturally should be a part of the proposal if we're talking about the preservation of homes and we're addressing particularly the aging infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we already have a robust, successful program that's here that we were married to in terms of, well, I would bring it under this umbrella as opposed to being a council advocating initiative, but something that I think as we work in partnership with,
Yeah.
that the administration could take the ball and run with.
We would, I can confirm we would be happy to continue that conversation about including them in this proposal.
Okay. Mr. Rob DeBoe, just want to get an idea around, just real quick, the $800 million in borrowing, just for the record, the cost of the debt service and the total amount of the debt service.
Good morning, Rob Dubow. So the debt service will be, after both bonds are issued, about between 66 and 69 million a year, depending on where rates are when we go to market.
And what's the total amount,
Total amount, give me 1 second, I have it here. I think it will be, I think it's about 1.3, a little bit over 1.3 billion.
And how long will the city be paying on the debt service?
20 years?
20 years? And for every $100 million borrowed, what's the debt service on that cost?
So for every 100 million, it's about $8 or $9 million.
About $8 or $9 million?
Yeah. A little over 8, actually. I'm doing the math in my head.
And out of the additional $200 million that's projected for us to get from outside sources, how much has already been secured? I know we talk about the unions, like the unions want to be a part of this particular project, and I guess they're going to be using their union funds to participate. How much commitment has been made thus far? Are any project labor agreements a part of that process in terms of the commitment with the unions? And since they're going to be at the table, I just want to see their commitment on diversity, equity, and inclusion regarding making sure that they're going to partner with the city of Philadelphia, right? And they get a return on investment, which is the jobs that they're going to get for generations to come. Then we're also building generations of wealth for Black and brown children as well, if they're going to be at the table as a part of this project. So one is, how much have they committed thus far? Is there any actual real commitments? And then two, their commitments in making sure that they're providing a diverse and inclusive workforce. I know we talk about apprenticeships programs a lot of times, but I'm waiting to see, what they're actually doing in terms of hiring the children from the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah, so we're still in discussions, so there are no formal commitments, but there is definitely a lot of interest there. And those discussions are kind of serious and happening right now. We talk to them very regularly, I would say. And obviously that kind of opportunity you're talking about will be part of those discussions.
And Rob, I know you're on point in terms of oversight and doubling down and making sure we're doing things right. What would that arrangement look like? Like, I know on the private side, I've seen unions step up and say, XYZ developer wants to build a tower, and then that union will provide the funding from their union fund to help finance the project, and I guess return on investment, obviously, they'll get the work and they'll get paid back after the project gets done. What does that look like for the city of Philadelphia to engage in that type of partnership? And have we done anything like this before in the past?
So for them, it likely would be investment from their pension funds, which would mean they'd want to understand what kind of return they got and also what kind of jobs were created for their members. And they would want reporting on that to understand what that looked like for them.
Have we done a risk analysis that in the event that they do this type of investment of their workers' pension funds,
Correct. That's right.
that the market in terms of housing still continues to flourish and go forward, but is there any liability on the city side in the event that the housing market tanks and they've already invested so many millions of dollars from their union pension funds?
So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, and obviously things that they want to understand and we want to understand as we get to the point where we have a solid commitment.
Okay, we would like to be briefed as a body.
Yes.
Just as long as we want to make sure we're fiscally responsible, the process is transparent, and we know that we're being good fiduciary
Yep, completely
stewards
agree.
of the taxpayer dollars. And so that's all I have. A point of information, Mr. Rulandau?
Yeah, thank you so much for this help on the debt service. Can you explain one part to me? Do we always pay a fixed amount on our debt service? Does it ever decrease? How do we forecast that in the
Yep.
future?
So for these borrowings, they'll be what are called fixed rate costs. You can do fixed rate or variable. Variable rate will go up and down, and so you have interest rate risk. For these bonds, they'll just be fixed rate. So we have fixed debt service for each year.
Do you ever get to refinance?
Yeah, so if interest rates move in the right way, and it would be, it would save us money to refinance, and we do that. We do that all the time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. And one last thing. Mr. Thomas, you talked about the waiting list. Is that a waiting list or expressions of interest? Just want to get clarification. Like individuals, you actually said, "Hey, we're going to work on
So
this."
I'm going to say it's a waiting list at its present state. So for us, we consider it a waiting list because we're still waiting on documentation to determine eligibility in some cases. So I'm going to say we've engaged the constituent. We've had preliminary discussions. We understand what their need is. We just haven't been able to put them in the bucket of eligibility just yet.
All right, thank you very much. And for the record, I always give you flowers. Thank you for your hard work that you're doing. I give my shout out to Janae Mumford over there and Ashley Gilmore that make sure, particularly on those bread and butter issues about turning the key and making sure that we're addressing basic systems repair that spends $1 million a week, which again shows that there is a crisis. But I wanted y'all to crystallize it coming from you as opposed to me. It just shows that level of need. At this time, I want to turn it over to the Chair of Housing, Councilman Jamie Gauthier.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning to all of you. This is a very exciting day. I want to start by saying that I support this robust level of spending to combat the affordable housing crisis. I agree with Chief Thurman that this crisis is real, and frankly, it just gets more expensive the longer we don't properly address it. While I am excited that housing is at the top of the mayor's priority list, I also think this body has a responsibility to be asking probing questions on this plan, especially given that Council's MPI initiative is in its final year, and so that means that home will be our main source of funding related to affordable housing for at least the next 4 years. And so I hope that you will take my questions in that spirit and not as criticism of the vision. This $800 million must be transformational in its impact. But based on the information that we currently have, I don't feel like we're currently all the way there. Right now, it feels diffuse, with dozens of different programs listed and without a clear through line or sense of spending priority. We're sprinkling a lot of money in many different directions, and I'm hopeful that you can give us some clarity on the rationale for that. I'm also concerned that the home plan's goals are actually lower than the goals of the Kenney administration's Housing Action Plan, which sought to create or preserve a minimum of 10,000 units per year, including 4,000 units per year for households at or below 30% of AMI. Can you speak to that as well?
I believe that we're in different times. I do think that we have the ability to address what we can, given the path that we've spelled out here. I would say that, the Kenney plan was much more people-based than this is being compared to this, which is a much more unit-based right now. We think about the approach in the sense that we're trying to make sure that we have the ability for people to maintain what they have in the best ability that we see fit when it comes to the bond issuance here. So, I think that 30,000 units is an ambitious goal. I think that the split that we've identified is based on the data that provides that there is a supply and demand issue, more so a demand than the need and the shortage. So our goals are predicated off of the data that reveals where exactly that shortage lives.
From a data perspective, can you speak to the rationale for actually decreasing the amount of units for people at or below 30% of AMI? What is that data and how does it factor into this plan? And then can you speak to the rationale of taking the $800 million and kind of sprinkling it over dozens and dozens of programs?
Well, the rationale in spreading it across different income levels aligns with the administration's effort and initiative to really provide some sort of economic opportunity at all levels and all income levels throughout the city. So, we totally abide by the fact that, there is no need to exacerbate the ability to concentrate poverty, which is why we're trying to provide some sort of upward mobility for not just those at the lower incomes, but also at the moderate incomes as well. So, that's our approach. That's the administration's approach. Growing the pie, making sure that opportunities are provided for everybody to spread economic opportunity for everybody. And your second question?
Are you suggesting that supporting people at 30% or below is concentrating poverty as opposed to helping people to move up the economic ladder?
I'm suggesting that not addressing other income levels is not what the administration would like to do.
So it's essentially, Councilmember, the approach is more comprehensive. And comparing the 2018 report, I believe it was produced in 2018, as Jesse said, it's a very different time than it is now. And so based on our current state, market trends, what the need is now across the entire city, we took a comprehensive approach. Now, taglines like sprinkling, programs, I won't address that. What I will say is that this is comprehensive, and we're looking at not just housing, but systemic issues across the city. What's driving those systemic issues, and how do we address that? So it's ensuring that, regardless of where you live, regardless of, what challenges that you have, that everyone could see this plan and see what we mean by when we say economic opportunity for all. So it's not a sprinkling, it's a comprehensive approach.
A couple more questions, if that's okay, CP. Okay. I also think that the information we've been provided so far doesn't show us what the full story is behind the spending decisions in the home plan. For example, we need more information to actually understand the full intent behind home. First, I see that we just received updated FY26 budget numbers this morning, so that will be very important for us to review. Second, I do think we need the FY25 budget detail for each program so that we're understanding whether we're increasing, decreasing, or staying the same as it relates to the programs in the plan. And third, it looks like we're leaving off a few sources in other sources of funding, particularly leftover proceeds from previous bonds that we haven't spent yet, and money the city has gotten back from our various loan programs. How many millions of dollars like these haven't been spent yet, or do we plan to get replenished to put back into the programs listed under home? I just think with without all of this data, we can't see a full picture and have a full sense of how we're investing our resources. And lastly, we've heard a lot about a large legislative package that will accompany the home plan. I'd like for you to outline what legislation the Parker administration is hoping to get passed by council this June. So first, if you could speak to some of the other information that's kind of missing from the plan that might help us to better understand the spending, and then if you could further outline the legislative package.
Absolutely, and we've been very transparent in our process with the council briefings. We made a few corrections this morning and was transparent about that as well. And also in that forecast that you're looking at, it does explicitly say what programs are, where the expansion is taking place, what programs are being, and what new dollars will be invested in that. But I have Rob DeBoe here, our finance director, to talk more specifically about that. Then I'll come back and talk about the legislative package.
Thank you.
Right. So there's the $1 billion includes $800 million from the two borrowings, and then there's another $200 million that is a combination of money that we put into the Housing Trust Fund, both from the general fund and recording fees. And then there's federal money from things like CDBG and HOPWA and ESG. So all that money will be going into the program. And as you pointed out, there's still $50 million left from MPI that the council is really helping direct where that will be spent.
Would it be possible to update the documents that we have with these other sources of funding so that we can have a full picture?
Yes.
Thank you.
And while we have not introduced the legislation yet, I know that we spoke with you and Council President yesterday around several bills that we're looking to introduce, including proposed zoning text amendments, Tier 1 legislative projects around CMX, CM4, parking revisions that we're looking to introduce as well and talk through with members, and then zoning districts, looking at updating our base zoning districts around RTA2. And so we are prepared to talk about that at a later date, but that's an overview of the legislation that we're looking to introduce.
When do you anticipate?
Are there fiscal notes assigned to every piece of legislation you're sending over? Analysis of all of them, Mr. DeBoe?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you.
When do you anticipate we'll get that package?
We will get that package as early as, I need to look at my legislative team, Thursday,
Next week, I believe.
next Thursday.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Rulandau.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Council President. Thank you all for being here today. As you know, you've heard me say many times, I've been a lifelong housing advocate. I believe that housing is a human right, and I've served 10 years representing low-income tenants in housing court, ran the Fair Housing Commission. So I've been doing this for a very long time. I want to be really clear about where I stand here. I am absolutely excited that the city is going to do an investment of funds to what I hope will transform the way we are handling housing here in the city of Philadelphia. I am all in for it. I think where I might disagree with you all would be where we place this money. And to be clear, I believe I could say for myself and clearly many of my colleagues, we are not trying to pit the have-nots versus the have-a-littles. We are just not. In fact, that's where I want the largest investment of funding to go, the have-nots and the have-a-littles. It's the higher levels that are a little more concerned to me. I too know that our previous housing plan, I'm so proud of our city, we've been outperforming those numbers, and know that had we stayed on track with that plan, we're reaching significant goals that I fear we will backtrack from if we implement this particular plan as stated. 1/3 of Philly's households earn $30,000 or less, which is more than 200,000 households here in Philadelphia. but only 9,000 of the total 30,000 units in this plan will be created or preserved for people earning 30% of AMI. That's $31,000 or less. So just to be clear, 30% of AMI, the household earns $31,000 or less. This is proportionately lower than the target under the previous plan. We've only seen a list of initiatives that will be continued, expanded, or introduced under this plan, and how much of the total funding will be dedicated to each program, but not the targets for each. How much of the home budget will be dedicated to support the housing needs of families and individuals that earn 30% of AMI or less? And can you detail which programs funded under this plan will be targeted for those households?
Well, first, I'd like for Jesse to address the 2018 plan, which is very different than this plan, to ensure that we're not spending an inordinate amount of time comparing the two plans or saying one plan is better than the other. So I think that I'd like for Jesse to answer that, and then we could answer the question around AMI. Thank you, Council Member.
Yeah, I mean, I just simply put, the 2018 plan was a 10-year plan, and that number laid out the 100,000 unit target. Ours is a snapshot or a smaller term, 4 to 5 years, 4 years, to be honest with you, for 30,000 units. And again, it's much more about making sure that we're preserving the actual production and preservation efforts. That 2018 plan speaks a lot to some of the plans that we have here today, or earlier versions of the plans that we have here today. It does not abandon them. We're not abandoning that plan because a lot of the same initiatives that were coming out of that plan rise into this plan as well. So, I mean, we are looking to make sure that whatever we did here when it came to this current plan, we didn't completely abandon the 2018 plan.
I do want to suggest that under DHCD's dashboard, the numbers of units, households that you will affect under your current plan will decrease for our lowest income Philadelphians, I believe, under this plan.
Again, I think we are responding to the snapshot in time right now, 2025, understanding that we have done an updated research effort on where that need is production-wise and preservation-wise. And we're, this plan is, again, pivoting toward the production and preservation of the existing housing stock, in addition to supporting a good amount of what resonated through the 2018 plan, through the programming and wraparound services that are in the stabilization and incentive efforts that we're presenting in that category in the 2025 plan.
Okay, so can we get back to how much of the home budget will be dedicated to support the housing needs of families and individuals that earn 30% of AMI or less? And can you detail which programs funded under this plan will be targeted for those households? I'm looking for the total amount dedicated in each program, not the targets for each. Thank you.
Have that coming up to you right now.
Just give us a quick second to pull that slide up.
We're calculating that up.
That's good. Thank you. They're calculating the numbers.
Councilmember Landau and Council President, we can get back to you on that even today during the hearing.
I appreciate you so much.
Absolutely.
We'll be here all day, and so
Same here.
want to give them a chance.
But I also want to clarify that the materials that we provided in Appendix B, we do have we have the affected AMIs, the affordability levels and the income bands.
It's broken down. Yeah, I saw it.
They're on each snapshot for each program.
Yes, it's not showing from each program how much will be affected to 30% or below. So that's what I'm looking for.
So if you can just get that before the end of the day.
We can get that breakdown for you.
Maybe at a second round
Thank
we'll
you very
have it.
much.
So, the chair recognizes, go ahead, Rue.
Oh, no. Thank you.
You're welcome. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dr. Anthony Phillips and then Councilmember Kendra Brooks.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to say really quickly that I really admire the work that the mayor is doing right now to address something in housing. No slack to previous mayors from Good all the way up into our recent Mayor Kenny. But this is the first time a mayor has put this much attention on housing in a way that, you know, anyone that's led the city has. So I love the presentation, I love the effort, and I think I can see that this is such a serious thing. I also want to make mention to the fact that, you know, a lot of this stuff I recognize that you all are doing is still being worked out, but the research and the things that you put together is impressive so far. I liken this back to the time when we had the situation with the wellness center, where people were concerned about how that was rolling out, and look how well that's come in. So I know the housing thing is going to come together too, so I admire the mayor for that. Real quick questions I want to share with you, a few things. One, I was in the gym this morning, and y'all laugh, you'll mess around, I'm gonna walk in here like Donovan West and niggas are work one day, looking like them. But I just want to quickly say, there's a resident cornered me. She said, "You tell them I cornered you, Phillips," and said to you, have you all done research around social housing that you've seen in Europe, and basically try to make some levels of comparisons to the social housing that, and I know Kendra Brooks also went to visit with Jamie Gaudier, spaces like that, but how have you adopted some of your work to what we've seen in Europe?
Councilmember, thank you so much for that question. And I don't know if you saw the look between the two Brooks in the room, but this is something that we have been in ongoing conversation with Councilmember Brooks about. And I'll kick it over to Angela to talk more about that work.
Yes, my cousin over there brought this up in our briefing with her last week. And, you know, and ironically, two of the cities she modeled were actually here in the U.S., Seattle, my hometown, and Chicago, where I moved here from. And so we are looking into that, and I just want to remind everybody that as we are working on this plan, we want it to be a living, breathing document that we continue to ebb and flow and introduce new things to, as opposed to a lot of the plans that are, this is the plan and we're not going to change it. And so I think some people are looking at our housing plan and saying it is social housing. Like, that's how they read the plan that we're producing. And so we're ebbing and flowing and looking at that. So we are looking at some of the social models that have been presented to us, particularly those that have been done in other states. We've got a big book here of best practices that we've seen. So we've been looking at those. So that is in the works. We will be looking to address Councilmember Brooks' specific question on that as well in the very near future, but it is something we're open to, and I would imagine that some of the programs that are proposed here would be certainly considered some implementation of those.
Thank you. So Ms. Adrian, you got your question on the record. That was who asked me. And also, I just want to go quick questions on this. In the 9th District, they're loving, as you said, Tiffany, they're loving the idea that now there's accessibility for people in our income bracket to get some housing done. We've had dilapidated housing, or houses not dilapidated, but needing structural repairs, and now they can potentially be eligible for these programs. So I just want to ask questions that could be helpful for them. Members of our community are going to ask, how can they get involved with the curbside appeal program and how that's going to be executed? What is the criteria? They're going to also ask more questions about how can they get on the list for the basic systems repair program in terms of they want to know if there's going to be a quick timeline and turnaround for this with the new housing program, what new structures you all have. So yeah, they're going to ask, like, how they love it, but how do they get involved? And so just kudos to the mayor and you all work on this.
So, I mean, we're going to lean heavily on our One Front Door module here for the programs that allow, that mechanism is going to, it's being stood up to allow for you to apply for these types of things and be able to understand what you're eligible for. The curbside appeal program will be something that we're looking into standing up. We're going to have those conversations about how to stand that program up. It'll be something that is going to be administered in-house. However, the approach of applying will be married with the one front door module. Basic systems repair will also be one of those DASA programs that will be on there as well. So we would coordinate application opportunities through the one front door the one front door module, sorry.
Okay. Thank you so much, Council President.
Thank you. Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President, and it's good to see you guys again in a couple days. I do have some continuing conversations from the things we had before, and I'm gonna start off with social housing. The home proposal sets aside $160 million for affordable housing preservation or construction. This is much needed funding that could be used to create social housing by preserving homes like those with UC Townhomes or Burr Shalom. Where in this city will this funding be spent, and how will this limited money be allocated between different neighborhoods and council districts? And I'm gonna get this on the record. Who will make the decisions about buildings that will be preserved or restored? And will city council have a role in the decision-making process, and will community members have a role in the decision-making process?
So we definitely want to remain engaged with council about how we make those decisions going forward. I think that, you know, the partnership that we have in council is understanding what's going on at a local neighborhood by neighborhood level. As we look into how we preserve, and I think you were asking questions along the lines of, like, you know, how we approach demolition of things that could possibly be preserved. We would definitely be open to having that conversation about figuring out how our programming responds to something like that.
Both with council and community members?
Yes.
Okay. And my next question is, many times, public funds are used to help construct or preserve affordable housing, and the ownership of these buildings are given to private developers. Once the area gentrifies or it becomes unprofitable to maintain properties like Burr Shalom, the private developers back out and sell the properties at market rates, forcing working-class tenants, seniors, and families to move. Many other cities around the country have recognized that and decided to keep the buildings that are preserved using public dollars. Actually, affordable to the public by holding a majority ownership of the land that the housing is built on. Will the buildings constructed or preserved with public dollars under the home funding be at least 51% owned by the public? Will the private developers be able to control the properties that are built or preserved with our public dollars?
And a point of information I want to add to that, will we consider engaging in public land trust as a part of this overall initiative? And also, I'm gonna just stick with the public land trust as a part of, the proposal to take in consideration as well, where we control our own land as well.
Yeah.
And WCRP, which is the Women's Community Revitalization Program, started by North Lictash and Grace Ferry, specifically for women, right? And I gave her the land, city-owned land through the land bank, and rents are only about $300, right? But they control the land, and it's a sweet spot to help a low-income family get into the middle class. And so just want to add to that same line of questioning.
Yeah, so where the programming we're proposing starts to speak to that, it speaks to it in a couple of different ways. There's the acquisition fund that we are earmarking for introduction that will give some capital to a public developer for acquiring multifamily homes or vacant properties or land for the most part, and, in an effort to increase affordable housing. So that public land developer, maybe PHA for that most part, they would have some sort of component that would require some affordability as well. We're also looking at the ability to do something called a 70-30 public-private partnership. We have a model at 13th and Bainbridge in your district, which has allowed us to hold on to the land with a long-term lease mechanism. We're looking to mirror that kind of model throughout the city, mixing up income, but at the same time, 13th and Bainbridge was kind of the first one that we did, right? So we're taking pages out of that book, learning from that processes, and looking at investing in the ability to look at where that type of model can thrive throughout the city. You know, holding onto our land on a long-term basis does give that opportunity for us to control the affordability component.
And I'm going to relate the time back to my member, but do we see the value of actually engaging a public land trust, though, in the future as a part of this billion-dollar?
We see
plan?
that there needs to be a discussion around how that type of thing works out right now. I think that there are certain council districts, I believe, that have some sort of requirement there to engage with a potential land trust prior to an application. I'm talking about publicly owned land. There's a requirement to engage whether or not a community land trust might be interested in purchasing something prior to. But we think that that is the start of a conversation that, quite frankly, I think we're willing to have to talk about how something like that is implemented within the realm of vacant surplus land here.
And I thank Angela Brooks for saying this is a living, breathing document that is not set in stone, so thank you. Member Brooks?
Yes, and my next group of questions, I'm gonna just ask them at once before my time run out. It's about One Philly Mortgage and the public bank. I would like to know about the One Philly Mortgage Program, which department will oversee the proposed program? Will the city actually be the mortgage lender, or will it be partner with another lender? What will be the interest rates? And finally, what enables the program to work without private mortgage insurance? And part two is banks are problematic actors through predatory loans, through determining who gets loans. What oversight of credit institution exists, and how does the city monitor the impact of financial institutions on neighborhood integrity?
So I'd like to call up our interim director of DHCD, Mark Dodds. But in the interim, what I can say is that One Philly Mortgage is meant to have the city invest in parking funds in a pool with others. So there'll be some commitment from investors and lenders. But we would like to see that program live at DPD. And maybe in addition to Mark, one of our consultants can talk about where they've seen similar programs. And we're in the very early talks with those conversations. Our model is driven from One Mass Mortgage, and we have talked to the lenders that have done the work in One Mass Mortgage as well. And they can talk to, Ira's pulling up, Ira can talk to the status of those conversations as well. So, you know, Ira can talk to how, again, those conversations leading up to now as far as the status of evaluating something here. And then Mark can talk about how we at DHCD administer programs of that nature.
And Jesse, can you also have them elaborate on, and I know we talked about this, but I still want to go on the record, because we're both in line with the same type of thinking. In our briefing on this proposal, we talked about the possibility of engaging in the banks that we do business with as a city, right? We put millions of dollars in banks every single day, right? And how could they be a part of this process, right? And I think they should be a part of this process. And so could you elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, sure. And before I hand it over, I'd like to just note the fact that, you know, similar to what you just described, we've had existing conversations with a lot of these banks for Turn the Key, right? And their conversations have been along the lines of willingness to lend to a particular constituency with, you know, in kind of your typical traditional markets might not have the credit worthiness. So, you know, we would definitely continue that engagement and conversation. You know, those banks are lending toward a mortgage buy down. This is evolving into a conversation about providing a loan product, right? So, you know, I think that you make a really good point in understanding that we have engaged in conversations with banks. We have a great significant amount of connections and relationships that we have the ability to harness here. So I'll hand it over to Ira to talk about the status of those conversations.
Thanks, Jesse. And as it relates to the One Philly Mortgage, to be clear, the city of Philadelphia is not becoming a mortgage lender, so we wouldn't be making those loans. It would be done through a private lending institution. In all likelihood, it would be lending institutions that do business with the city of Philadelphia. The One Philly Mortgage is modeled after a very successful, long-standing Massachusetts program, which marries up mortgage lending with housing counseling, both pre and post-purchase. It includes a loan loss reserve, which in this instance, the city would be putting up as loan loss reserve, which allows the lending institution to make the loans without private mortgage insurance and under more liberalized terms. In this instance as well, the city would take an active role in figuring out what the particular underwriting criteria are for the beneficiaries of this program so that we could ensure that all those bad things that you mentioned don't take place with this program. And what I would say is that because there's such a long-standing history with the Massachusetts program, what we can say is if things operate in a similar way to the way they do there, that this program would experience no greater losses or delinquencies than their experience, which is basically tracks the prime mortgage market. So it's an adaptation of an existing successful program. We would not be the lender, and we would just be putting up the loan loss reserve. The last piece I would say is that in certain circumstances, one of the plans for this product is that the city would pay discount points to reduce the interest rates where necessary to help somebody qualify in a way that does not stress their income and make them more vulnerable to a mortgage delinquency. So the city funds under the program would be loan loss reserve, some program administration, and paying of discount points.
And just to add before Mark goes into how we manage those types of programs, I want to be clear about the fact that we do have experience with setting underwriting criteria. We've done that in the past with Restore, Repair, Renew. It's a program that's been truly successful at this point. So, we have that expertise. We have the ability to do that.
I mean, I can attest to the track record of helping individuals become first-time home buyers with particular banks in this process, and so hopefully we can ramp that up on steroids as a part of this particular proposal. So I definitely can attest to that. Member Brooks, you wrapping up?
Yeah, can I just add just a follow-up
Go ahead,
question?
Mark.
So as they finish, so you could just answer this as well. So my concern is that if we're going to use the city's budget as a de facto public bank, would the mayor consider signing on to the still pending legislation enabling a public bank so that the city can utilize a financial institution with appropriate protections and guarantees in place to do the things like pay the percentage of down payments for low-income buyers? And that's my follow-up to that.
We can't respond to that question now, but we're happy to respond to that question in writing, which we will do immediately. And then I'll kick it over to Mark to answer your first question.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I think Ira did a great job of going through the details of what that program might look like. Mark Dodds, interim director for DHCD. I would just say that in order to operationalize everything, well, we tend to draw on existing programs. So earlier we talked a little bit about Philly First Home, first-time home buyer program. The infrastructure for that program contains a range of housing counseling agencies. It's a collaboration between DHCD, so our contract analysts are doing intake and processing applications and reviewing everything for accuracy, and PHDC, who's ultimately making the payment. So I think even though they're very different programs, the goal is the same, is to create, a home ownership opportunity, and we'll be able to draw on the success of our current programs to implement that program.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Jim Harity, then Councilman Dr. Nina Mai.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing this morning? Just want to get right into it because of time. I guess this would probably be for DeBoe. Why is the city choosing to borrow $800 million through unsecured bonds rather than secure ones, especially given that this approach not only increases borrowing costs significantly, but also reduces transparency around how and where the funds will be used? Start with that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by secured versus unsecured in this context. We're proposing to go to market in the way that we do for all of our bond issues. There's nothing different about this approach from a typical bond issue for us.
Okay, but there are secure and
do you mean why aren't we getting insurance? Is that the question?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a decision we make.
Excuse me, Rob,
Yep.
just 1 second. Point of information. Member Young?
Thank you so much. Just for clarity, maybe my colleague, referring to tax exempt versus taxable bonds. I mean, those are something that.
That's the question. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Got it. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Mr. Bo.
And the rationale is that many of the programs that are part of this initiative don't qualify for tax-exempt borrowing, and because of that, we would issue taxable.
Okay, all right, I got that. All right, how will the city ensure that the 800 million is spent at a pace that matches our borrowing schedule so we're not over or underutilizing our funds? And the goal of the plan is 30,000 affordable units. Can you give us a breakdown of number of units based on their affordability threshold? How many units for each income bracket?
So I'll take the first part and then hand it over to Jesse for the second part. So the pacing will drive the timing of our bond issues. So we think that there is as we've talked about, a great need so that the money will be spent quickly, which is why we want to borrow a substantial amount. The second borrowing is based on how quickly we think we will spend that money. If we spend it more quickly, that could be moved up. If we spend less quickly, it could be moved back.
Okay, so we won't be penalized if we're not spending it fast enough?
No.
All right, good. And then if you could just get to the second part, which is the goal of the plan is 30,000 affordable units. Can you give us a breakdown of the number of units based on their affordability thresholds? How many units for each income bracket?
Sure. So, thank you, Councilman. What I can give you is on the production side, for opportunities that are deeply affordable, that's 0 to 30% of AMI, we're earmarking 1,800 units on the rental side. And I just want to be clear, one of the questions earlier was about whether or not, this particular program is going to address the need at that particular AMI. We opened earlier to talk about how this is a strategy that it's complementary of PHA's strategy, which is much more well-equipped to tackle that particular AMI. So, I just want to reiterate that we can't do it alone, which is why PHA's program is far more complementary than it's ever been at this point, and it allows us to focus on the expansive income opportunities as well. Just to continue, sir, on the affordable side, which is 30 to 50% of AMI, we're looking at 1,400 units of ownership and 2,500 units for rental. For workforce housing, which is that income band between 50% to 80%, that is 2,100 units for home ownership and 2,900 units for rental. For Workforce Plus, which is 80% to 120% of AMI, that is 1,100 units on the ownership side, and the need for rental units at that particular level is 1,400 units. 1,400 units, yeah. On the market rate side, we do earmark that there is a need for 300 units above 120% of AMI, but I want to be clear about the fact that the programs that we're presenting are much more responsive to all the other rental units or the numbers that I've described for you. Moving to the preservation column, for deeply affordable units, we estimate that there is a need for 7,200 units to be preserved from 0 to 30% of AMI. For affordable opportunities, 30 to 50% of AMI, we earmark 7,900 units that need to be met for preservation. For workforce housing, the number is substantially lower, from 50% to 80% of AMI, that's 1,200 units that need to be preserved. And for Workforce Housing Plus, we have 200 units that above 80% of AMI that need to be preserved.
How many was that? I'm sorry.
200 units.
Beautiful.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. The chair next recognizes Councilmember Dr. Nina Ahmad, and then the leader of the Kensington Caucus, Councilmember Ketty Lozada.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to commend the mayor and all of you, her team, on this bold plan to grow Philadelphia. We really have to go back to our 2 million residents Our city is built for that, and I think this plan will help us get there. I do want to make sure that we are using all the tools of government to make sure we are laser focused, that we're making good decisions, right? And the purchase of a home, and I'm really focusing on home ownership here. The purchase of a home is one of the largest and most important investments, and is critical that homeowners remain vigilant to protect this investment. Philadelphia's homeownership rate has, as Tiffany alluded, has dropped to 52.3% from 53.9%. That's a significant drop, and we are known in the country to be a homeownership-focused city. So similar to price fixing, if you recall, the federal government, the Department of Justice is actually suing the real estate company RealPage that had engaged in collusion and price fixing. Similar to that, I am concerned about predatory investing. And I wanted to know, this is, what I mean by predatory investing is investors are acquiring available single-family homes, which exacerbates the housing affordability crisis. So I wanted to know if you guys are keeping an eye on the data around the purchase of single-family homes by these corporate entities. Will you be surveilling their home purchase activities, ensuring transparency in how these properties are being purchased by corporate entities versus individual buyers? We really have to stop predatory investing that is hurting our homeowners. And I don't know if you recall that our former vice president had really championed the Stop Predatory Investing Act. I think it's still alive, and it's just been reintroduced in Congress earlier this year. And that really, the question is the aim to level the playing field for everyday buyers who have the desire and means to purchase, but are being outbid by these corporate entities. So it really is, what are we doing to pave the way for a more equitable housing market? And sunshine is the best disinfectant, so I would love to see, what are you doing to keep an eye on this?
Thank you, Council Member. John Monlek, I'm a Deputy Director in Planning and Development. And you raise an excellent point. It's a challenging point that's a challenge for every city across the country, not just Philadelphia. And the solution, part of the problem is the solution is what we all want is for these companies to stop buying. But it's not so easy to prevent somebody from buying, and that's where we get into, okay, what can we do? And I'm actually not familiar with the legislation that you mentioned, but I'm gonna look into it because I would say we need more tools than we have. And so what we are doing as a city is Philly Stat 360 is a very data-driven part of our city. And one of the things that they have been digging in deeply is trying to figure out, okay, who are these people? How do we link them all up? Because they buy in a LLC that has a unique name, often named after the address, and it's hard to figure out. So what they'll do is they'll dig deeper and they'll scan the documents, and sometimes AI is actually very helpful in this to figure out, okay, who are the officers? Who are the people that are signing these to try to make links? And they have been able to do it. And there's actually, we've also talked with services, consultants that provide this service that depending on how much we can provide versus how much need we have, we may engage with them to provide this data, because ultimately right now, what we're looking at to try to help solve this problem is enforcement.
Yep.
The price colluding is very difficult. That is something that we haven't gotten into, suing people to, it's one of those things that I would love for us to do it. It's hard to prove. You have to have a lot of evidence, and a lot of those cases get dismissed. But if you can prove it, that would be excellent, because that's ultimately what you're trying to stop. The other thing that we have a little more influence on is trying to stop the bad behavior, because what they're doing, if you think back to the Bristol loan, I mean, that was outright illegal what they did. Like, they liquidated every piece of value out of that property and walked away. They were criminals. They were criminally charged in other jurisdictions. And so in those situations, you want to do criminal law remedies. Some of the situations, it's just these investors that are just buying up all these properties and they've concentrated in one area because ultimately they want to get to collusion. They want to get to price fixing. And if you don't have a certain percentage of them, you can't do that. You have to be able to control the market. So they don't want to just scatter all over. They want to focus on different areas. And the key is to try to figure out what they're doing early. So I mentioned Philly Stat 360. They've been successfully able to do that. They did a pilot in Kensington to see if they can determine that. And then what we have to do is step up enforcement and make sure that we are citing them for every bad thing that they do. And number one, you want to improve the conditions. But number two, you also want to be a thorn in their side. You want to make it difficult for them to be successful at their game of buying, not investing, jacking up rents, and then ultimately sell at a higher price. I mean, that would be the exit strategy. So that's what we're doing. We're doing it through data, and we're doing it through our L&I quality of life enforcement.
Yeah, thank you for that, because the surveillance part is going to be critical to do what is downstream needed to do. And I think sharing that surveillance information with Philadelphia, with us, council, and our constituents would give a real eye on who are the bad actors. I think that has real value as we're figuring out how to hold them accountable. And that's where I think having a dashboard on the surveillance of these and who's buying what and cross-referencing that to give that data would be very powerful so that our constituents can actually see who's, and then, this brings up the whole issue of people selling at a much lower rate than they could, and all of those. There's multiple other things that I'll put into writing that I think we could use as tools to inform our constituents about how they should negotiate in this space.
I agree, and I appreciate the ground sourcing of information. I think that's an interesting point. And I also agree 100% that folks that don't necessarily understand the resale of their property or don't have folks to talk to about it, they'll take the first offer they get. And it's a crying shame because that's who's behind those offers. And they flood the market. Like everybody that owns real estate probably in the city, every single person probably gets those texts and those emails, and most of us know that they're scammed, but somebody that's desperate to sell their property for whatever reason may take advantage, sell at a much lower price. And I'm going to quote Octavia Howell, who's our Deputy Director for Planning and Development. She has a Planning Commission, she's Executive Director. She has a great story of her aunt who was in this situation, and she was fortunate to be able to step in and say, no, you don't need to do it. Your house is not like a tear down. It's not a gut job. You don't need to sell it to an investor. This is a perfectly functioning home. It's a little dated because it was her great aunts, I think, or her grandmother's. And it can serve a family, and that's what they did. And she said, just be patient, put it on the market. And somebody bought it, and they had a starter home that at an affordable price that paid more than the investor, but didn't really have to do anything. And so how do you get to that? That's what you want to achieve so that people aren't feeding into this and making it too easy for these investors.
Yeah, exactly. So it has to be an information campaign that is undergirded by data so people can understand. We need to get our communities ready and educated around this, and I think you have the tools to do that.
And I think that's where that community engagement comes in, that Councilmember Gaultier, she's been talking about, we agree with. It starts with the housing town halls, right? We had one last week in the second district. We're going to do more. They're not scheduled yet, so coming to a neighborhood near you. But that's part of that community engagement continuum. It's not just a one hit and then we're done with that section of the community. We absolutely agree. There's an ongoing information campaign that the government can't do alone, nor can council. That's where our executive, or rather our external stakeholders come in. And one of the things that, even Ira Goldstein, one of our consultants, said earlier, this plan, coupled with all of the work that's happening, under Kelvin Jeremiah's leadership at PHA, it really holistically approaches and addresses, the needs across, all the income bands that we've talked about. So while Jesse gave that breakdown, the notion that we're going to spur predatory lending and, or that we don't care about low-income people or that we're not prioritizing them enough, we're looking more toward middle income, well, that's absolutely not true. And both the data shows that throughout the report, but also that's why we're here today to talk through that. So I appreciate that question and the opportunity to respond to it.
Thank you.
If I may add, Council Member, the engagement piece is important because that's where we start to communicate these programs that we're putting out, right? One thing that would drive people away from selling so quickly is the access to the opportunities to improve their properties, right? So, rental improvement funds, making sure that we're including things like that and continuing these types of things, it spears away the ability to say, look, I can't afford to do what I need to do, and it's probably just a better option to sell. That should not be the case, and that's what our program should be responding to on the preservation side.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Councilman Ketsi Lozada, Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke. Next.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for being with us today. I would ask Mr. Goldstein a question, and then I want to put on the record 2 questions that were sent to our office from constituents that I'd like to ask. But prior to me coming into City Council, I know Mr. Goldstein did some research for an organization or a collective of organizations like Esperanza around the housing crisis in districts like mine. And so my question is, does this initiative respond to the crisis in the housing market in districts like the 7th? Have you shared those findings with your team? And if it doesn't respond to those crises, what are some of the challenges or what are some of the changes that you'd like to see included in this initiative that would respond to that 20 to 50% AMI that we know we desperately need in places like the 7th?
I don't know if you're directing that to somebody else, but I could try to answer it and then we can. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And good to see you again. I think that the home plan is aggressive, it's big, and I don't think it meets every single need of every single person in every single circumstance, to be quite honest. But I think it's an amazingly large and multidimensional plan and strategy that's designed to hit a lot of different segments of the Philadelphia population. I did do that work on the area median income, and I do know really well that, those percentages are based on a 4-state, 11-county region that in some ways sort of overstates where Philadelphians are in terms of what the resident incomes are. And that's why, by the way, that we put in this table of all the needs, we put the actual income levels themselves so that you could see who was going to be touched by the different programs. So you'll see, for example, in that deeply affordable line of the table, that is 0 to 30% AMI, that's actually up to about $32,250. So those are actually people who are on the sort of, in the Philadelphia standard, kind of modest income. But there are significant resources that are keyed to that population, that income band of population. And in fact, 30% of the total plan is to that band alone. And then if you sort of move up a little more, you pick up another 40% of the plan. So 70% of the production and preservation that's planned under home is for households targeted under 50% of AMI. So to your question, does it solve every problem? In all honesty, I couldn't say that it does. And, were the city in a position to do $2 billion or $3 billion of borrowing, I think we would get closer to solving all those problems. But I do think it's a plan and a strategy that represents I think enough different kinds of strategies pointed at different income levels and tenure types that you will see benefit in each of the council districts, recognizing that they're all a little bit different in their makeup.
Thank you for that.
And can I jump in right here? Because I just want to make sure we say on the record that the home plan isn't intended to be the ask-all, be-all of solving the housing crisis. We've shown time and time again, public investment always sparks private investment. So the 30,000 units that we're talking about aren't the only units we think will come from the improvements that come from the home plan by process improvements. For instance, in DPD around permitting and ZBA, we'll see a lot of market rate developers and nonprofit developers able to better accomplish their unit delivery goals as well. And so I just want to make sure we're very clear that we're not only saying that during this time frame, these are the only units that will be developed. We are anticipating that the private market will also move and do things that are outside of this plan that will also be able to celebrate and will contribute to unit delivery and addressing the housing crisis in Philadelphia.
I just want to say a point of information just on that point, and I think that's why it's critically important with this billion-dollar borrowing is that we're doing as much as we can to invest and on the low to moderate income side, because the market is going to already take care of those individuals who are going to really pretty much be well-to-do. And so I think that's something to critically always keep in mind as we go through this process, because yeah, you're right, our investment will spur more investment, but that's more the need for us to really double down on those most in need, because the market will take care of itself based upon our development. That's just my thought. I didn't say that for the, I'm just having legitimate conversation based upon me doing this work since I arrived here.
We wholeheartedly agree with that, Councilmember. Absolutely.
We agree, and that's why it's really important that we continue the work that we do in support with PHA, and that the two plans that are coming out together will be very great in collaborating in kind of touching all of the income brackets that are impacted.
But just one part I just want to clarify, and I'm glad that PHA is a part of this process, but we're talking about the $800 billion that we're just borrowing on behalf of the city of Philadelphia.
Yes.
PHA is really going to take care of itself regardless. If we weren't doing this plan,
that's right.
Calvin Jeremiah would still be on steroids with federal money trying to PHA the whole city, right? Which is cool. I grew up in PHA housing, but I also recognize that in terms of our responsibility with this borrowing, that it's incumbent upon us to really do that deeper dive to making sure that we're critically addressing that population that's most in need. And that's from low income to also workers as well, because we have workers who work in council or just purchase homes, first-time home buyers. And I remember when somebody said, well, it's not a housing crisis. And I remember going into my own house, and it was a PPA worker who approached me and said, hey, I'm about to apply for Turn the Key. And I'm sure she's getting a reasonable paycheck at PPA, a nice salary, right? But she said, hey, I'm really struggling. I'm trying to purchase, she didn't say struggling, let me change that. I'm applying for Turn the Key, and I'm going through the process. And so when folks say, well, there's no housing crisis, and I'm walking into my house separate from me doing constituent service work, young lady pointed me to the side and said, I'm going through the paperwork process, and I hope I get in. And so that's all.
That's the point right there, Councilmember. We have staff in the Planning and Development Department that are helping to design these programs that can't afford to purchase a home and they have a desire to. That's not right. That's not right at all. So yes, so we want to make sure absolutely people that are low income, they have that pathway to self-sufficiency, that we're thinking about that. But along that continuum is also the people within planning and development that can't afford housing right now, that want to own a home.
Working class. The working class moms I've
Absolutely.
seen that can't even purchase a home. Councilmember Lozada, you want to wrap up
Thank
with
you.
your line of questioning?
Thank you, Council President. One of the questions that was submitted to my office that they asked us to put on the records was, would nonprofits and other organizations that offer transitional housing be eligible for funding or support under the Home Initiative's preservation efforts?
The answer to your question is yes.
And is there any support within the initiative for wraparound services such as case management, employment support that are essential for transitional housing residents?
we will be putting funds toward programs that support those types of things in conjunction and collaboration with OHS for administering.
As well as housing counseling and financial education.
Awesome. And my last question is, what is the process for nonprofit transitional housing providers to apply for funds under the Home Initiative? Has that been established yet?
Council member, I need you to repeat that question. That was pretty fast. But I heard that I think our Director Hill will be coming up from OHS. But could you repeat your question, please?
Thank you. What was that?
Could you repeat your question?
Sure. What is the process for nonprofit transitional housing providers to apply for funds under the Home Initiative? Has that process been established yet?
Thank you. Cheryl Hill, Executive Director of the Office of Homeless Services. We do have some programs currently that people can apply for as we have the RFPs out for them. We have currently RFPs out for supportive housing, supportive services, as well as some housing programs. We also partner with Jesse's team on different programs, including a pilot that's including renovations to rental programs and in exchange for providing services and housing to people experiencing homelessness. So we do have that in part of the Home Initiative as well. But then we'll work with them continuously to see how we can expand those programs.
Awesome. And then my last question, since the Council President is busy, does the preservation
No, I'm
component
always
of
on
the...
point. I saw you. I'm doing latitude. Go ahead.
Does the preservation component of the initiative include funding for substantial renovations such as updates to kitchens, bathrooms, common areas, and bedrooms?
The answer is yes. There will be funds. Once we get them, they will be earmarked for programs that support those types of improvements.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Nick O'Rourke, then Councilmember Cindy Bass, and then we are officially going into our second round.
Just adding my...
I'm sorry. Then we'll have Councilmember Jay Young, and then the second round. Sorry, Member Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm adding my voice to the chorus by expressing appreciation for the focus that this administration has placed on this issue in the second year of the term. A functional North Star that I've followed since joining my colleagues on this council is to make law that materially and measurably improves the lives of our citizens and working people every single day. You can't get more material than housing. And as Madam Mayor points out often, if you want something done, make it somebody's job. So I appreciate that this has been prioritized in year 2. One of the Home Initiative's most important goals is to repair and preserve our affordable housing stock. This is a goal that we are deeply aligned on, and which I'm also fighting for in my Safe, Healthy Homes campaign. One of the goals of that campaign is to fund enough L&I inspectors to create a full proactive inspection program that would make sure that all of our families' homes stay in good, habitable, safe, healthy condition. I think it was Ben Franklin who first said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. In this case, preventing housing falling into disrepair is much cheaper than fixing them, and therefore I believe more prudent. At our March 18th Housing Committee hearing, L&I told us that in order to get a proactive inspection program up and running that could inspect all of our rental units, the department would need to hire 110 people with a budget increase of around $6.2 million, dropping a bucket as it relates to $800 million. Can you help me understand why we are not investing some of this $800 million into a proactive inspection system to prevent homes from falling into disrepair? And if we had done this many years ago, we may not need the $800 million now, and if we do it now, we may not need to do it again later.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. DeBoe.
Our budget does invest extra funding in license and inspections, and we can get you the details on that investment.
Okay. Thank you. I'm excited to see the Basic Systems Repair Program receiving a sizable increase in funding. I'm also noticing that the income eligibility is increasing from 60% AMI to 100% AMI. Framing that for folks, again, we've talked about it a bit, but 100% AMI for a family of 4 is $114,700, while the actual median income for Philadelphia City is about $60,000. I understand the goal here, to extend this critical service to more families who are struggling. However, the total amount of new funding going to the Basic System Repairs Program over the entire home initiative is only enough to slightly extend their current annual budget of $40 million by around $20 million a year, assuming, as Mr. Lawrence said, that this is being a 4-year program or plan. Additionally, funding for our other repair program, Built to Last, is being slashed. We talked about that a bit, especially considering potential federal funding cuts that would decimate funding for both programs. We have serious concerns about whether we're putting in enough money to merit extending eligibility to thousands more families. A few questions that I'd like to try to get on the record. We already know, and thank you for answering this already, that there are 7,054 families that are on the wait list at current eligibility requirements. That's correct, yes? So I'll just say, yeah. How many new families do we estimate will apply for the program under the new eligibility guidelines? Will there be preference given to families at the lower AMI requirements? And let me get this other one. I know that the largest source of funding for this program is federal CDBG dollars. Is there a plan to transition more funding to BSRP if that federal funding is cut?
So hopefully I captured all the questions. And please.
Chair recognizes Councilman Jamie Gautier.
I'm not sure that the FY26 number for BSRP is as high as was stated. I may be mistaken, but I wanted that to be specified. I'm not sure it's as high as 40 million.
Mr. Jesse, can you just clarify
That
for the
number,
record?
FY26, is not $40 million. Yeah, that number for FY26 is $9 million in addition to, in addition to $13 million in CDBG and $551,000 from Housing Trust Fund. So those numbers do not include the home bond commitment.
So sorry, it just makes the council members' question more critical, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for clarifying that. That's very helpful to know. Thank you, good point of information. But yes, can you answer those other questions though?
So hopefully I recall everything because it was a lot. But what I can let you know is that the target that we're looking, the funds that are being committed to basic systems repair, that yields the ability to serve about 7,500 households.
Okay. How many new families do we estimate will apply for the program under the new eligibility guidelines?
We can get that information to you in writing.
And will there be preference given to families at the lower AMI requirements on that?
We understand that the need is that need is at 60% and lower, right? But we also understand that we've taken the time to quantify the data that represents the need for repairs at levels that are higher than that 60% of AMI, right? So we totally want to prioritize. We want to prioritize the 60% of AMI because that obviously is the need, and that's obviously where the wait list has been quantified from. But we also don't want to cut out the many constituents of the 4th, the 6th, the 9th district, the 10th district who make slightly more than those income eligibility requirements limit you to. So we can get you the numbers as what we think that anticipated growth would be. But we certainly want to respond to the moment in time that says, look, just because you make over that 60% of AMI doesn't mean that you don't need the relief and access to the funds to make the repairs. In our opening statement, our chief of staff talked about how people have to figure out how they're going to buy eggs, how they're going to buy, school supplies. And those are struggles that are felt at any particular AMI, right? So
in my family.
As those costs go up, the disposable income goes down, and we see how that's marginalizing people. So we will do the research to figure out what exactly that opens up, but we certainly want to respond to the moment in time that clearly says that not only do those at 60% of AMI need to be, provided with some relief and basic systems repair, we also want to address that need above. And then, talking about how the existing funding outside of home responds to the income restrictions based on different funding sources between Housing Trust Fund and between CDBG, respectively 80 and 60% of AMI, I think are the max numbers that both of those can actually go up to in providing services. So that particular portion of the funding committed to it will have to be dedicated to those particular AMIs. It can't go above those particular AMIs. So there would be a certain portion of that if in fact we figure out how to amplify basic systems repair plus at a certain minimum at most would have to go toward those particular AMIs. So it is in a sense, is prioritizing the ability to respond to just those at that particular or the existing AMI.
Just to make sure I got.
Yes, and these are also very restrictive funding sources. So, we have no ability to wiggle out or exceed those particular targets for the constituency income levels.
Okay, let me get one more. I heard the bell. I may have to come back to this to clarify later, but the previous 10-year tax abatement came under significant criticism for spurring gentrification and leading to unnecessary development in well-off neighborhoods. Since then, the state passed Act 58, which grants the city the power to create a 10-year tax abatement to incentivize the development of deed-restricted affordable housing below 60% AMI, which means the housing would be guaranteed as affordable for the full 10 years of the abatement. When I asked about this in our briefing upstairs, we were told that the administration was not planning on using Act 58 to ensure affordability. If our goal is to incentivize the development of affordable housing and not simply spur luxury development and gentrification, why are we not taking advantage of this new tool?
I'd like to call up my colleague, John Monlock, to talk about the work that we're doing around the tax abatement and reviewing that.
Councilman, thank you for a great question. We did almost use that, I think on North Broad, and maybe in, I want to say the first and third, okay, in a couple districts. Now, I wasn't involved in it, so I'm going to tell you what I understand, and then hopefully somebody will raise their hand and maybe correct me if that's not correct. But my understanding was that it had to go to the school district for approval and did not get approval. That's my understanding. I just know that it's not, and it was hard to track it down. I went through a lot of sources because the bill was passed by City Council, but is not applicable. It's not being used. And I don't think we're.
Can somebody clarify that for a point of information?
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. And certainly we will follow up, but it's not matched right
just
now.
Give me a second, sir. Sure. Just for a point of information. Could your team get clarity on it? Because I don't think the bill, it was Clark bill. If I'm correct, it never made it out of council.
We will definitely do that,
Yeah,
sir.
I'm sure, because it was the level of pushback, regardless if it was affordable housing or not. The public didn't have an appetite for the actual abatement, but if we can just get clarity on it, that would be helpful for the member.
Absolutely. But I think we could all agree that it's not being used today.
Act 58 is state. Yeah, okay, make sure I'm clear.
Act 58 passed.
Yeah.
I'm talking about there was also a bill sponsored by the former council president specifically to provide tax abatements for the affordable housing projects that we're working on. And I know at that time that bill didn't advance forward, that's all.
Yeah. So I don't think there's opposition to it. That bill allows for, if you include 30% of your housing units at 60% AMI or lower, you can take advantage of the abatement. But again, for whatever reason, we tried that and it didn't work, and we'll get to the bottom of why it didn't work. We will at some point be engaging with council to talk about an abatement program that maybe we could talk about that program. I don't think we're excluding that, but also just about bringing back the abatement in areas that haven't been fully invested in, so that it wouldn't necessarily apply to like all the condos, the high-end condos downtown, but other areas of the city that haven't received the same amount of investment. And again, it's going to have to be a discussion, but the idea would be that we do bring it back to 100% in certain parts of the city and not all of the city.
That'd be a great discussion to be a part of. Go ahead, Mr. President.
Yeah, this point of information, just clarify that in terms of uniformity clause, where we can pick certain areas to apply the abatement to. And because from my understanding, the uniformity clause limited us from doing that, but if something has changed, can you elaborate on that for me, please?
Yeah, so I can't give you the definitive answer because that's going to have to come from law. We are meeting with them next week to talk about that very issue, but there have been discussions, and my understanding is that if you can establish the reason for doing it in certain areas and not other areas, and the reason we would do it in certain areas and not other areas would be based on the market value analysis that TRF-RF does for a number of cities, including Philadelphia. So they analyze census block data to look at what is happening with investment and pricing, and they do a very pretty map that has 7 different colors, I think, that shows where the investment is happening, where it isn't investing. And what we would do is we would look to exclude the areas that have the significant investment and include the areas that didn't. Now, again, I am no longer in the law department. I'm not going to opine on that, but we've had initial conversations where the law department has kind of indicated that if you can establish it definitively, how you came to this rational reason for coming up with this strategy, that it should work. Now, if they look at it and say, no, it doesn't, then so be it. That's not going to be an avenue, but right now, my understanding that it would be an avenue.
Okay, great. Member O'Rourke, like to wrap up before we go to Councilmember Bass?
Sure. Thank you. The home plan is pitching a list of pre-approved private developers that will receive preference for land distribution from the land bank to develop housing. While I understand that the efficiency to this, it also raises some serious questions and concerns I'm sure that you've already heard from. Can you explain how this plan would not create any potential legal or ethical issues for the city, preferencing some developers over others? And how will the newly developed homes be guaranteed to actually increase the stock of affordable housing versus just building more empty luxury units that we have seen since COVID?
So, thank you for the question, Council Member. I'd like to step away from the word preference in this particular case. I think we're leaning more toward pre-authorization, that of which, because we're referring to the creation of a pool of developers that we know the council members are comfortable with proceeding in the development of housing here in Philadelphia, right? So, you know, the special disposition process that we are thinking about in relation to the greater plan looks to earmark at least 1,000 properties out of the total public sector's inventory. That 1,000 properties would be spread throughout every single council district. It'd be citywide, and that conversation would be with each council member to figure out exactly what properties make that list. When it comes to the developers, we are cognizant of the fact that not only does the public sector and the housing agencies have a sense of where the developers are able to deliver, we all know that you all have a sense of where you know that certain developers have developed the appropriate community relationships to get things done, right? So, you know, the pre-authorization effort is really to streamline. Across the board, we're trying to streamline processes, right? So this particular pre-authorization approach is meant to streamline the approvals process when it comes to developers. We would have to work very closely with the council members to figure out what that pool of applicants, developers would be, right? And in the same way that we work as the housing agencies and the landholding agencies to vet the applications on developers and their ability to, you know, qualify for development opportunities in terms of access to capital, capacity to do the work, ability to clear things like tax clearances and stuff like that. We would do that in concert with you all informing that authorized list. So we're looking to minimize the same risk that we would be looking to do as the approval agencies in getting through the development
So the process to create the pool would be basically in concert with the district members saying, here's our list.
Absolutely.
The district members, yay or nay.
Absolutely.
But also to the question around the legality of it, right? And how we would do that. We don't do anything without the express approval of our city solicitor and our law department. So we don't work with the law department. I'm sorry, sir.
It's along those same lines. So giving us an overview, if you're pre-approving this land, right? What's the transparent process of putting together a pool of developers, right? What does their process look like, right? When we get into primarily district members saying who gets to build and who don't, how does that process transfer where a person don't feel like because district member X is cool with developer Y, I feel like as an outside developer, I've been pushed to the side, right? In this whole process of pre-approving properties. And then also, if you pre-approve the properties, which basically says the land bank, once you signs off on it, has these 1,000 properties that they're gonna move forward with in concert with the district council member. Where is the community input in this process? Because it's similar to us doing by right legislation, where once you do by right, we have no say-so whatsoever when a developer comes inside our community to build. And so once this list is pre-approved, one, just give an idea what that transparent process looks like
Absolutely.
for developers who may want to participate, and then two, the process of the community
Yes.
having some level of say-so, because now they'll still come to the land bank and express either support or non-support, hopefully in concert with the district member, but sometimes against the district member. And if their needs aren't met there or concerns aren't met there, then they'll come to council and say, we support or not support. So how would you ensure that that district member still has the opportunity to advocate on behalf of the voices of his constituents or her constituents that put them in office?
Sure, and while this is a new concept here, other cities do what we're talking about, and so we have proof positive. We have a landscape of how this could look. The first thing I'd like to do is to have Angela Brooks talk about what that landscape looked like in other cities that she worked in around land disposition, and then the methodology. Jesse will take that question. While Angela's gearing up, I want to say that community engagement is going to be upfront and often. As a former RCO member, head of zoning in my community for a short period of time, I know the importance of having that engagement early and often. I also know what happens, and I see it in my community every day when I take my daughter to school, what happens when that process is usurped and we have developers that are building by right against what the community is asking for. So that's what we're guarding against. But Angela can speak specifically to that, and then Jesse.
Great, thank you for the question, and Councilmember Gautier prepared us for this question when we briefed her earlier this week, so thank you. And so I'll start with the kind of first part of your question in terms of how that process can look. When I was working in Chicago, specifically with the Housing Authority, we had a pre-qualified developers pool. And so it was a similar process to the longer process, but we just did it on the front end. And so we did a pool of developers that went through a public procurement process. So anybody could have applied, and they went through the process, and they were vetted in the same way, and they were selected through that process. And then as the development So then with the development sites that we had, we went within that pool to do the disposition for that. And the community engagement piece, and that's one of the things, and I'm assuming that's part of the reason that I sit in the mayor's office, is so we can have a more proactive engagement on a lot of this in the first place. So often engagement is project by project. And we really have a vision of doing more engagement globally, and so working with the district council members, particularly on the front end, we're going to know we're going to work with the council members to figure out what those 1,000 parcels are. So we're going to know what those are long before there's any kind of work done. So working with them at the designation point and talk about what is the community vision, what is the district council members' vision for those properties on the front end. Because when you get to project by project, that's where it gets very defensive and it's not a global process. And we think that'll be more effective, and I think it'll work better with some of the visions of some of the district council members on what they want as well.
So that's the thinking behind it, but we also know that we have, and what we've shared is, the first thing that we want to do is to look at the full data set of properties that we're talking or proffering to be a part of this. We want to meet with each district council member by member, and bring that data set to them, ensuring its accuracy, right? And that it's comprehensive. Once we have that information, then we're looking at a methodology that looks at everything from need to ensuring that we're addressing the need, but also that we're touching every district. Then once we do that, we'll sit down with the council and then look at how we prioritize that in an effective way. But nothing that we're going to do is going to be in a cone of silence or secrecy or not with transparency and not working with council, particularly district council members, but certainly council.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just want to add to the fact, when it comes to the process, we're just seeing benefit in being able to front load. I think Angela talked about the ability to bring certain steps to the forefront. An experience in having worked with the community engagement piece when it comes to the land bank and the disposition part of everything. I'm of the mindset that certain constituencies probably didn't find out about what was coming down the pike as far as development until maybe a week before a project was on a particular agenda, right? So we're seeing benefit in being able to front load the approvals process so that you all as council members have the ability to be in front of that along with the community, being able to, or giving the community members the ability to react or be able to digest what's coming down the pike as far as potential development before a project is even conceived, applied for, or even permitted or near, considered at this point. So, because we want that to be in congruence with whatever the initiatives are. We want to be clear about those initiatives. We want to be clear about the fact that those initiatives are aligned with a particular set of selected properties, because if we're going to talk about an expedited process, we understand that we still need to receive all necessary approvals, and repositioning that process in a way where, again, community engagement is not only just engaging on what the what prospective project would be, but just kind of the initiative of the home plan period, what the home plan looks to achieve in all of this. And to be clear, we set up the parameters around certain design. The pre-authorization list would be more so aligned with turnkey opportunities, infill opportunities, scatter site opportunities. We're not talking about, properties or development opportunities of, economies of scale. Things that really do need consistent and constant community input. That's not meant for this process.
Understood. I understand where you're coming from in terms of single-family homes that are built under turnkey. As you go through this process, I think before we even vote on it, at least for district members, you probably want to have crystallized that framework if individuals are even comfortable participating from that aspect. And so, but thank you for giving me that overview. Councilmember Ulrich, you got your answers so I can move on to Councilmember Bass before we get Member Young and then break. Okay, thank you. Member Bass?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. How are you? So just a couple of questions, and I want to start off finishing up on the Council President and Councilman O'Rourke's questions, particularly around participation and who's going to get to participate in these projects. Because, and I know that this is a new administration, y'all trying something new, but typically this administration has done, typically previous administrations have done a pretty horrible job of ensuring that there is participation among Black and brown folks when it comes to these kinds of initiatives. And so I want to make sure that we're not going to be supporting something that's going to continue that trend. And I know you both very well, and I know that you're committed to this, but how are we going to be ensuring, how are we going to really make sure that Black and brown people are really going to be building in their neighborhood? Nothing is worse for me as a district member as when I am near or at a public project, and I'm just going to use a project many years ago at Vernon Park, in which there was a public works project, and it was across the street from the Philadelphia Hair Company. And the guys are watching people who are not from their community, not from their ethnicity, from the suburbs, from New Jersey, doing a public works project. And they're like, Sin, what's up with this? And how do I possibly begin to explain, these kinds of things that have continued to happen in our city for a very long time. So I'm just very hopeful that we'll be able to address this time in a meaningful way, because it hasn't happened in the past, and that would be transformative.
Thank you, and we truly appreciate that comment. I will say that this plan is taking steps toward that. I would say that this plan is also planning to capitalize off of some previous things that were put in place at PHDC, specifically around minority development programs and training through those particular cohorts that recognize that there needs to be a bit of a level playing field between developers that look like me and those that don't look like me, right? And this program the plan that we're putting together, or have put together, includes a few programs that talk specifically to that, giving access to bonding, which has been historically a barrier for developers that have been historically disadvantaged in this particular space. Also looking at some sort of contracting training, which is going to quarterback off of that minority developer program that I just described at PHDC. And also, I see my colleague John Monlot prepared to talk to, or I'm sorry, Camille sitting behind him, who can speak more toward the workforce training cohorts that we're looking at. But we do recognize that is a space that needs to be filled, and that is something that we prioritize in this administration, giving that opportunity to Black and brown developers.
And so even when we're working with, our partners at the trades union, or we're working with, through our community, our city college for municipal employment, we're thinking holistically about who's on the job, who's doing the work, but also ensuring that we're creating that pipeline. So to talk about that workforce development pipeline, I've asked Camille Duchesset, our Chief Administrative Officer, to talk about what that looks like from a workforce preparedness perspective.
Okay, and I know I have limited time, so if we could give me the condensed version of it. but-
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I missed that.
Condensed version.
Okay. So good afternoon. Thank you for the question. Camille Duchesset, Chief Administrative Officer. And then succinctly, I will say that both from a procurement perspective and from a workforce development perspective, the beauty of this plan is the convening. We are at the table as the plan is created and as we are, forecasting the work that's going to be done. So all of the opportunities, all of the techniques, all of the systems that we can bring to bear in terms of making sure that our workforce development programming outreach is targeted, as well as our procurement practices are targeted.
Well, listen, I'm excited that you're at the table. I will say that, one of the things I hear in the streets is, we've had, Black folks at the table for a long time now. This is not nothing new, and we haven't moved the goalposts at all. We've had, Black mayors, black everything. And so, but we haven't been able to, for whatever reason, get in front of this issue. So I really hope that this administration is going to be transformative in that matter. So.
Yeah, and they were at the table, but they weren't the key decision makers, and that's different now.
Okay.
That's one of the things that are absolutely different. So.
I heard that. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
My other question really quickly is around the programs themselves. And the question that was asked earlier was around the amount that's being invested in like BSRP and the other programs Built to Last and the amount that's being invested versus the overall effort that we're making, particularly around home ownership. How do we ensure that we're not setting people up for failure when we have these programs that are great programs, but with very long wait lists? And so if we're setting someone up for, let's say, a Turn the Key program or a similar program, and the monthly mortgage is $1,500, and somebody's struggling to pay that $1,500, and then something breaks or something goes wrong or something happens. And I know that on Turn the Key, these are new properties, so it's not as much of an issue with them. But on other programs with other properties, we're just getting you in the door. And then it's like, all right, well, good luck. And any homeowner knows when you have that first major system malfunction, it becomes a state of panic. What do I do? How do I fix this? I don't have an extra $3,000 laying around right now, or $5,000 for a heater, or for this, or for that. So how do I, fix these items? I am concerned that with all that we're doing, which is great work to get people housed, that once they are housed, that there's not going to be sufficient funding in those programs to keep them supported. And, and I know we can't do everything, but I want to make sure that we're not, again, setting people up for failure with all that we're offering.
These numbers are a start, Councilmember Bass, and if this body chooses to add additional funds to it, we would gladly welcome that and accept that. So we agree.
Well, I'm going to make a motion. No, just kidding. Mr. President, I make a motion that we increase.
We're already at $1 billion.
So, okay, well, I'm glad to hear that, and, we'll be continuing to pay attention and to make sure that we're, getting people off on the right foot as we get the economy going and things of that nature, to make sure people are housed, working, can afford what we're, the situation that we're putting them into, that it all works together. So,
absolutely.
Thank you.
And just to kind of cap that conversation, I think that, that's why the importance of things like housing counseling and making sure that we're, it's not just the repairs, it's the ability to be a homeowner. And making sure
Absolutely.
that, pre-housing counseling, pre-purchase, also post-purchase as well. That's why we're making sure that those types of programs are empowered in this particular plan.
Well, I am a strong proponent of housing counseling as the first housing counselor for what was then Mount Airy USA and now Mount Airy CDC. When I used to work with David Thomas way back when, before he had gray hair. I don't have gray hair. So, but I'm a strong supporter of housing counseling. And again, more money for those services, I think, will make a huge difference. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jeffrey J. Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. So most of my questions have been asked by my colleagues, so it's good to know that we're on the same wavelength. But I do want to follow up regarding the taxable bond that we will be issuing for this. And so typically when a municipality issues a taxable bond, it's deemed that there's no major public benefit. And particularly a lot of these taxable bonds are issued when it's investor-led housing. And so can you talk to us, and it's typically when there is not a large public purpose. So can you talk to us about the role that the investors are going to play in the, I guess, implementation of the home initiatives, particularly, it was mentioned earlier that the unions will be investing in this. They have a vested interest in their memberships and their members working. And so to Councilmember Bass's point, the majority of their members don't look like our communities. So can you just talk to us about what their role would be, right? Because they're at the table as well, making these decisions. So what is their role in making these decisions on how to implement the home process? And what do they, and how will the city essentially, how can the public trust that the city as a whole is making the decisions versus the investors making those decisions?
So, Councilmember, hopefully I heard your question correctly. There was a little bit going on, but is your question, how do we make sure that the city is monitoring the process of, could you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Essentially, it's how can the public, right, ensure that it is the city of Philadelphia, the city officials making the decisions versus the investors who are the unions making these decisions regarding the implementation of the home program.
So for instance, and be frank and transparent about this process. So let's say you had a building trades, right? And we have turnkey program. Okay. And some of the turnkey programs, depending on the threshold, some members may believe that those should be union contractors on the site versus non-union contractors on the site. And that kind of been a back and forth regarding that process. So what Member Young is saying, if they're investing, right, in our projects, how do we just make sure that the public interest is being addressed as opposed to them as being the investors driving the process? That's the clarity. Now, I know our mayor knows how to operate in that space, but still, for the record, we want to assure the public that this is the case.
So two things. I'll start with the question, started with the taxable bonds and how that process works. So what the bond investors will see is our plan for how we're going to use their funds. They don't get involved after that. It's not like after the bonds are issued, they're calling us to say, use this developer, do this project. Their whole role is just at the top to see what the general plan is. And so long as we're consistent with the general plan, they don't get any more involved than that. So we would be the ones making the decisions. It's not those investors.
And I saw that we are, and one of the programs is to identify approaches to reduce community opposition to, I guess, projects. I've been a zoning attorney. My very first zoning case, I lost, right? Because the community opposed it. Like, it happens, it's a part of the process. But in our zoning, if you look at the cases in front of the zoning board, there are more cases who are granted than denied, by far. And so why are we investing to educate the community to not be opposed to projects versus providing incentives for developers to develop in a more community-oriented way?
I think that's a very...
I support that, because sometimes developers show up in our neighborhood with the perspective of, as the mayor would say, I knows what's best for you,
You took
as
the
well
words.
as I've heard developers get up in the middle of Point Breeze and say, you should be happy that we're building.
Absolutely, you took the words right out of my mouth, and that's what we're guarding against, because we don't believe that, and we certainly, as an administration, will not perpetuate that type of thinking and leading. So, but John Monlack will speak to that question. Excellent question.
Yeah, it is. It's a very good question, and I think that I'm going to just try to answer straight up and say that it is really to help folks understand that development isn't necessarily bad. Like, development can be beneficial. And I'm going to give you an example. So we've met with the RCOs on a number of times in the last couple of months. We've had group meetings, breakout meetings, large meetings, small meetings. And one of the things that I've heard, and this sort of encapsulates it for me, and it may not work for you, but I got it a little bit better. We heard from some communities that didn't have necessarily commercial corridors nearby, and in the same meeting, they were complaining about, oh, there's just too much development. And I think it really was about the size and scale of the development. I don't think it was about they don't want anything, but that was sort of the message, is there's so much development, there shouldn't be any development. And at the same time, in the same meeting, there was communities around commercial corridors who were saying, how do we reduce the barriers to new housing opportunities, to smaller units, because people are getting priced out of our neighborhoods. And if we don't have SROs and smaller units, our commercial is gonna die. Like, we need it. And so I think part of this is trying to explain that, yes, we don't want things that are out of scale for your community. Nobody wants that, that's not good. But at the same time, there are benefits to having new neighbors, to having new people, to support the commercial corridors that you all want to enjoy. I live near a commercial corridor, and I don't want it to die. I don't even think it's as good as it could be. But it takes housing, it takes people to achieve that.
And I agree with that, but what in the home plan talks about comprehensive planning for neighborhoods, for communities to understand that process? I mean, we're talking about 30,000 homes. Philly is a city of vastly different neighborhoods. Where are we doing the comprehensive planning with community members so we can get an understanding of what their needs are, what their issues are as we move forward to develop these neighborhoods?
Councilmember Bass.
Point of information, I just wanted to say that the whole process, the whole point of the RCO process is to engage neighbors and to have them say what they want. People shouldn't have to have things in their neighborhood that they don't want. And so I feel like this is sort of like going around them and saying, like you just said, we know what's best for you. We know what's best for your commercial corridor. You know, your corridor is gonna, die if we don't do X, Y, and Z. I just think it's a very slippery slope that we're on by trying to say to the RCO, the folks who do turn out, we know better for what your needs are.
I'm certainly, I don't understand how that was the takeaway, because that is not what our process is. In fact, if that was our approach, there's no way we would have went and engaged RCOs. RCOs are a part of this plan. They've been one, briefed on, what our thinking is. They've also informed and helped to shape and influence the thinking. So it's not like we're coming to them saying, this is the plan, deal with it. Not at all. We have RCOs that have been on our advisory councils leading up, that were part of our transition team, advisory councils that were engaged all throughout phase one, and even now we have members who are on our advisory team. So nothing about our approach says we're going to go to communities and say we know what's best for you. In fact, we've gone on the record over and over again, and also have demonstrated through our ongoing engagement in every community that the community is a part of this. There's no bringing them to the table at the last minute. That has never been our approach, but we can show that and demonstrate that through our actions. I think what John was talking about is an alignment on things like definition. So going and saying, okay, you're saying you don't want this, but what is it that you don't want? Is it that you don't want development or a certain type of development? I think that's where that improvement can come in, and that's where that opportunity is even for our team. So not just hearing, I don't want this, what is it about that thing that you don't want? I think that's where that clarity needs to come in, and that's why that engagement is so important and so ongoing. So we haven't, even before we made sure, of course, that we briefed council first, right? Because we're always gonna do things decently and in order, making sure that you all understand what the plan is, and then right after, subsequent to those briefings, that's when we started saying, okay, RCOs, okay, leaders, okay, community members, we heard what you said. We heard what you advised when we were in transition. We heard what you advised all throughout last year. Here's what we believe is the end product of that, right? Here's the, not end product, here's the proposal based on that. Here's the initiative that we developed based on the feedback that we received from a broad array of constituency. Now let's work together to implement it.
Tiffany.
So,
Can I just add?
I was just going to say, I hear everything that you're saying, but I still say, if you are taking power away from the people, from the community who are making decisions, then that is problematic. And that's what it sounds like to me. Anytime we're saying that certain things are going to go around the RCO process, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds as if things are moving around the RCO process, which moves the community members out of the conversation. That is not what this is supposed to be. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
yes, and then we demonstrated, through even the 1,000 unit carve out, what that could look like, where it's not going around, it's changing the order of. So it's that engagement with council more upfront to ensure that, we're more efficient and we're optimizing our processes. It's that engagement of the community upfront. So what it is it's looking at our existing processes, which is like 100 steps. And I think we show that through a document that we've made available to all members of council. And through this refined process, it's not carving out RCOs or community engagement. It's changing the order of. And that really was informed by what we're seeing happen in other cities. I don't know if Angela wants to add there.
Well, one, I just want to go to Councilmember Young's original question. So semantics matter, and so we acknowledge that the wording might have been confusing, and one of the updates in what you got today has corrected that. So I just wanted to put on the record that we have acknowledged that, and that is not the intent. I sat on my last Chicago Zoning Board meeting as a commissioner in February. I've sat on the Seattle Planning Commission, so I'm super sensitive to community engagement in that process, in that way, as a person who serves. So that is certainly not something we're trying to circumvent. But the way I just said, semantics matter, so do visualization. And so sometimes people see a land use sign and they assume, somebody could be in a triplex and they assume they're doing a 20-unit development. And so what we're saying is we need to be working with communities, working with district council members, working with our, all of the processes to help educate in that way of what people are talking about. And like Chief Thurman said, we are really working to find out what is it you don't want on the front end, because when we keep finding out things project by project, that's just not an efficient way for us to work. That's not an efficient way to plan. And you're right, it has to be a comprehensive strategy, and that's what we're working to get toward. But certainly I want to make sure we are all clear that that is certainly just a semantic thing. That is not what we want anyone to walk away from. This administration really, we have a budget town hall once or twice a week. We clearly have an administration likes public engagement. Since I've been here, I've been to the community more than I have ever in my X number of year career. So we are definitely administration that clearly believes in engagement, and we would never circumvent that by any stretch. And so how it works in other cities a lot of the times is there are community plans, and I'm not suggesting that's what we're doing, but that's what we've done. Those are the types of strategies that I'm sure DPD will be looking at, and we're going to be looking to work with each of you on what you're doing in communities and proactively having those conversations. And so that's what we mean by that, and being more proactive versus reactive, which is how the planning systems just across the country typically were set up to work, and they haven't been updated in my lifetime, certainly not in my career, so that's what we're referring to.
Yeah, I would just make sure in terms of the proposal, and I'm going to give the time back to Member Young, that the correction, and I know it's all about semantics, because yes, this administration has been out in the community, right, from day one, right? And so you're not getting credit where credit is due in terms of engaging folks and being out in the community and giving people a chance to question. And so if that language has changed, just for the record, and I read it early on, right? And so I did pay attention to it. Just make sure members have it, just so it can be clarified.
Yes.
And also because this is such a robust initiative, right? To be quite frank, in my mind, in the event that members decide to do the pre-approval of units, probably the most important people, more than the district council people, are the community. Because they will determine if you come back to this body or not. At least that's how I operate it. And that's what we work for. And it's not the other way around. And so that would have to be key to any component, at least in my mind, if anything would be pre-approved. And the second, in terms of how the members of my neighborhood and my constituency view this process, and they feel embraced even more than myself, because when I go home in my neighborhood where I grew up at, I will be the one who have to address the issue. But I will say the administration has been out and about, but in terms of the actual language though, what folks will get, try to, how we will interpret it is how you present it.
That's right.
Right, in plain language. And so I want to divert the time back to Member Young, and then we have to get ready for our break.
Thank you. And just really quick, just a comment. I mean, I just, we earlier was mentioned how some investors will collude together in certain neighborhoods. So I think we really need to incentivize those same developers to collude together to comprehensively plan to develop those neighborhoods together, because it's just a hodgepodge of development when they are purchasing, particularly their private land and things like that. And so we can come up with, some funding to incentivize them to do more of a community development program. I think that it could be a win-win for everybody, versus just saying that, the opposition, the community opposes too many things. It's just, as someone who has represented developers, a handful, has represented business owners, has represented community groups against developers, right? So it's a lot of misunderstanding in that development world. But I really think that because the developers have, in the community's mind, they have the strength, right? They have all the tools necessary. We need to equip communities with those same tools to be on an equal footing with developers, and at the same time provide the developers with incentives, again, to be more community oriented. So that's all. This is just a tidbit that I have. So thank you, Mr. President.
I really like that, council member. I really do, and I'm thinking about ways that we can even improve that. I think a start to that is our advisory councils, which we announced, that advisory council, which we announced the day that the mayor introduced that executive order 3-25 earlier in the year. If you look at who makes up that advisory council, it's exactly what you're talking about: grassroots, grass tops, developers and aspiring developers, black and brown people that are representative, that substantiates our commitment to DEI, as you raised earlier, Councilmember Landau, and of course, making sure that whether it's supplier diversity or workforce development, that's all represented there, but it doesn't mean that there's no room to do more. We can always do more and improve, and I think that's where the feedback from what Mayor Parker calls live life experience is incredibly important to ensure that that's encapsulated here in this plan as well.
And just to add, we, again, if we're highlighting things in the plan that speak directly to this, we plan and we will continue empowering our neighborhood advisory committees throughout the city. Our local level partners are important to us, not just on advisory councils that come downtown to City Hall, but those that are actually in the community as well. I mean, it just solidifies the fact that we place a lot of importance on our community partners in the public participation process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last question before we break. I just want to get an idea of how does the administration see council's role in this plan, right? Do we expect, well, at least I would expect, but I want to get an idea from you and the administration. How do you all see our role? Will you be coming back with statements, public statements for the public, just to show here's our progress? Here's the strides that we're making. Yearly progress reports, like just to keep the public knowing what's going on, transparency, accountability. Where do you see council's role in this, especially given the extent that you want to pre-authorize properties?
Absolutely. It's that accountability piece, but also working together, having that synergy, that collaboration. And so as you were talking, I was thinking about Philly Stat 360 and how when we had our 5-year plan, Councilmember Bass asked about, what those recommendations were and what were we doing with it. And I said then, and we delivered on that promise of ensuring that it wasn't just a paperweight. It wasn't just a nice, beautifully designed plan that no one looked at, but only referenced maybe years later, like we're doing the 2018 plan. We wanted to make sure that it is a living, breathing document, but also that it's actionable. So we took those recommendations from the city departments, aligned with City Council, made that public, and now we're holding ourselves accountable. That accountability also is here as well, right? Council members are also holding us in our department, me, the mayor's office, and our departments accountable to what we're doing to remove barriers and streamlining processes.
Would you be comfortable with program statements coming before council every so often and be approved?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that
as
is
a partnership, but we have to also separate from the 360 stat on our end, we just have to be transparent for the record in terms of how we do business here, representing our constituents.
Absolutely, because those numbers on Philly Stat 360, they're important, right? They show our transparency, but it only tells part of the story. So I think that accountability is absolutely necessary. So 100%, when we talk about an administration that you can see, touch, and feel, that's where that accountability comes in. So bring us back. We'll talk about what we've done with those 1,000 units. What I don't want, on my first day in 2016, one of the projects that were brought into my lap was VAIR, was Simons. I see Dr. Phillips stepped out for a moment, but Simons and other rec centers when I was here serving as Chief of Staff of Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. And I was astounded that when I returned to government under the Parker administration, that we were just doing a ribbon cutting on VAIR now, 8+ years later.
I think you're speaking to the sentiments of this body, and so probably in part two, if we borrow $1 billion, 800 million, part of the question becomes, which members have been speaking about within our own meetings, is how do we spend this money
Absolutely.
in an appropriate amount of time, and which to structure and how that money gets spent. I know we borrowed a significant amount of money for rebuild. We didn't have that infrastructure to actually expedite those projects, and they're still in the pipeline, and I'm sure you're aware, so there's no secret amongst us. The question is, the million-dollar question is, in the event that this borrowing does take place, can we do this type of ramp up? Do we have the infrastructure to actually spend down an appropriate amount of time
and we have
this
learned,
level of funding?
Absolutely, and we have learned from that process, both what went well, right, and what didn't go well, where those bottlenecks were, to ensuring that we are not repeating that. We can't afford to because of the housing crisis that we substantiated earlier. And we do have those numbers for you, Councilmember Landau, and we're happy to answer that when we go back through our next round. But when walking through VAIR and seeing that wall fall down, the walls falling down, literally, right, as we were walking through with you, absolutely, when we were walking there with you and seeing how people had to be temporarily displaced. They were still doing programs in every room in that building, although it was dangerous. It shouldn't have taken 8 years then. And what will not happen, home will not take 8 years. That's why we're saying 2 to 4 years.
When we
Give us
come
the
back,
money and
we would
we'll
like
do it.
to see what that structure looks like. I know a PhD, a significant amount of funding is going to go through that
Absolutely.
agency, and get an idea of what that process looks like.
Absolutely.
Thank you. At this time, we will reconvene at 2:30. Council will be at ease.